entered the PM Entertainment Podcast.
Welcome to an all-new episode of the PM Entertainment Podcast, the show that sifts through the endless shattered glass and exploded rubble of a very particular run of late 80s and 1990s action films to find true beauty in the manic performances, the neon-hued cinematography, and watching grown men, while on fire, throw themselves through and off things. I, of course, refer to the mighty and important work of two men just looking to follow their dreams of making a movie and ended up making over 100. It's Richard Pepin and Joseph Mehy in 1989 who formed PM Entertainment, which emerged as a stunt-heavy, vehicular madness embracing, and a huge wall of flame beacon of the straight-to-video scene and a scorched earth breeding ground for martial artists, stunt people, and actors who once played Tarzan. I'm your host, John Cross, and don't forget, if you like the show, please remember to rate and review us on any of the podcasting platforms you use. Share our Facebook posts, like, comment, and you can contact us via our email, pmentpod@gmail.com. That's pmentpod@gmail.com. Our guest this week, for the last 18 years and counting, has consistently reviewed direct-to-video and VHS action, thriller, and occasionally erotic thriller gems on their blog dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com or direct-to-video connoisseur, and is currently tantalizingly close to their 200th episode of the DTVC podcast, which I strongly urge you all to go subscribe to, listen to, share, and shout from the top of a skyscraper about to all and any who will listen. I'm guessing if you're on the roof of a skyscraper, it's mostly maintenance people, helicopter pilots, and Gary Daniels or C. Thomas Howell who spend their time hanging off the edge of them. Ladies, germs, and those who dance to their own delightful and unique rhythms, it's the man beneath the orange moxie cap, author of several tremendous novels, and the guy who just proved that, yes, even Sir Peter O'Toole once slummed it in a DTV action flick. It's the one, the only, Matt Perea. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get it out to PM Entertainment.
Yes, fantastic. So, were you always into action films from an early age?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things I remember, obviously like the Chuck Norris movies and the Bronson movies, they used to play on a thing called the Movie Loft in Boston. So we got Boston TV channels where I lived. And so, we used to see those. But I think one of the funniest memories I had of an action movie was watching Lethal Weapon 2 with my dad and watching him call out the tropes. Like he was just was predicting the movie before it happened. And that kind of actually made the action movies more fun and maybe get into them even more. And then, low budget stuff, I think Showdown in Little Tokyo, that was the one that kind of made me realize that there are movies that just go direct to video that are as much fun. And that's when you start getting to like Don the Dragon Wilson, Rothrock, those kinds of names.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And can you remember when you first came across a PM Entertainment film specifically, and when you put together that sort of PM was a company that was sort of putting out lots of different films? Like, I know for a fact, like, that when we used to see the Canon logo, whatever, we'd go, oh, okay, it's a Canon film. Vidmark and Vestron and things like that. Can you remember when you first saw PM and went, oh, I think I've seen one of these before and I like it?
I don't remember exactly. It's more like I remember in like the early 90s when, these movies would be on cable that I just started to notice, like, oh, I'm seeing that logo a lot. Like,
Right.
it's starting to come up more. Kind of like another one would be Imperial. Like, I wouldn't remember when I first saw the Imperial logo, but it's one that I recognize. And it wasn't until later that I put two and two together. When I started doing the site and people started saying, hey, you should watch this movie, watch that movie. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a whole thing that I used to, this logo that I used to see when I was a kid, it actually, stands for something a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even realize it until watching movies for the Dr. Action and Kick-Ass Kid show. So it's really only in the last 15 years that I've even been aware of it. Although I may have seen them back in the day in video. I mean, I used to rent stuff like this all the time, but I it wasn't until much later that I twigged who PM was and really looked into it. Do you have a favorite PM film or a sort of a favorite top 5 PM films?
Yeah, I think it always goes back and forth between Recoil and The Sweeper for me. Those are the two that I kind of one day I'll depending on when you get me. Like, I think right now maybe a little bit more Sweeper, but I could also go Recoil again. Those two just, to me, the between the Spiro Rosato's action direction in them, the leads, which the fact that I'm putting C. Thomas Howell in the same conversation as Gary Daniels, but it's that good. The sequences, the chase sequences, the shootouts, all of it. It's just, those two for me are my two favorites. Zero Tolerance is a close third.
You can admit it. You like men with goatee beards and ridiculous leather waistcoats.
And House of Pain hats.
And House of Pain hats. All right. So our film on this episode, it is the Joe Lara and Brian James starring post-apocalyptic Western that features PM Entertainment's largest, loudest, and possibly most dangerous explosion ever committed to celluloid, along with Kane Hodder and a stunt woman taking a knee to the happy place. It's Steel Frontier. It's from 1995, directed by Paul Volk and Jacobsen Hart, Paul Volk was the man behind the men at PM Entertainment. He worked on damn near every single film they ever put out in some capacity, most often as the editor. It is written by and co-directed by Jacobsen Hart, who so far I think basically wrote my top 10 favorite PM Entertainment films of all time. We're talking Rage, Guardian Angel, Lion Strike or Ring of Fire 3, T-Force, Zero Tolerance, Cyber Tracker, Direct Hit, Repo Jake, The Sweeper, Executive Target, and more. I mean, come on now. Those are like top-level PM Entertainment films. Jacobsen Hart, what a legend. And the stunt coordinator for this one is actually Michael J. Sana, who did work with Spiro quite a bit on a lot of other PM films. And he also gets help from Cole S. McKay, who is another frequent stunt collaborator. We'll talk about Cole S. McKay on another episode because he mainly kind of works on the Rick Pepin films, and we'll get to one of those eventually. But Sana did stunts for other PM productions like Out for Blood, Ring of Fire 2, To Be the Best, Firepower, Steel Frontier, and Rage, all of which are fantastic. So he's definitely one to look out for if you see him in the credits on IMDb. Probably worth checking out that movie. And before we review and chat about the film,
It's the PM Entertainment Bullet Points.
we have a legless bloody man, fistfights, gunfights, blood squibs, men falling through windows, a motorbike driving through a window, a motorbike jumping out of an explosion, a tricked-out motorbike that can launch grenades from a little pipe, a motorbike-mounted, voice-activated Gatling gun called Angel, a stuntman already on fire, almost landing on a motorbike before it then explodes, seemingly engulfing him and I presume just killing him outright. Because when you see it on the film, you're just like, that's insane. No one could have survived that stunt. Futuristic Mad Maxi converted automobiles, car chases, car wrecks, a bus chase, multiple and glorious explosions, men in berets with daddy issues, desert-dwelling mongrels called roach eaters, gratuitous harmonica, gratuitous Brian James wailing and man tears, really gratuitous Kane Hodder wearing a hockey mask emblazoned beret, self-branding, impractical but luxurious hair, abseiling down a giant brick smokestack chimney, an enormous bowel-shattering explosion, Joe Lara in slow motion, desert roads, and spaghetti western echoey chorals on the soundtrack. It's an incredible film. Matt, why don't you tell the listening several what the plot of Steel Frontier is?
Yeah, so it's essentially it's a mashup of or it's essentially PM's take on the late 80s Sirio H. Santiago Roger Corman post-apocalyptic film with a little bit more Western in it. But yeah, the idea is that there's a town called New Hope in the future, 2019, post-apocalyptic future. This town farms old tires. That's the economy in this future. This is not the New Hope here in Pennsylvania. That's a beautiful little place to visit. This is in desert wasteland, California. But yeah, they get attacked by this group called, was it the New Order or the Death Raiders? They're called, or something like that. Death Riders.
They're the Death Riders, but they are the United Regime.
So they take over this place, and it's not good. And then Brian James is the leader of the United Regime, but he puts his number one lieutenant, Bo Svensson, and then his son, who's like this sniveling little worm of a son kind of person, in charge of the conquered New Hope town, while he goes to conquer more places. And so they're leading this place.
Because Brian James said, "You've got me for 3 days."
Right, exactly.
So we put him at the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie. Yeah. Because
exactly.
He's off building an empire.
Right, exactly. And so, so then one of the things is that, this is sort of like, those old Iron Curtain regimes where you can't escape. And so when people do escape, they go out and fetch them. And in this case, they go to fetch Lara. And after Lara, dispatches with a good amount of them, because this is where you get a little bit of Warrior of the Lost World. Lara is a rogue frontiersman with a bike and, gunslinger. And so, when he's getting chased by these guys in their post-apocalyptic vehicles, he's like launching grenades from little pipes underneath him, all this kind of stuff. But they eventually catch him. They bring him into the town, and he makes a name for himself as like, hey, I could join your gang. He has a
he Yojimbos it, right?
Right.
That's what so it's a little Mad Max, a little Warrior of the Lost World. Well, actually, technically, it's more the Road Warrior. It's more Mad Max 2. A little bit that, a little bit Warrior of the Lost World, a little bit Yojimbo, and a little bit High Plains Drifter. Like put that all into a pot. Add the PM magic, add Joe Lara's luxurious but thoroughly impractical hair, and that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and essentially as the film goes on, Lara, from within this group, he is, taking them out. He's, finding ways to get them to shoot each other. Then of course he meets a young woman, Stacey Foster, who we know from the Cyber Tracker films. She's Don's love interest there. She's there as the, beautiful woman. One of the things I think that was good about the future in 2019 is that somehow they were able to hoard hair care products. And so our two stars have nice looking hair. That
glorious.
Works out well.
I mean, silky.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
He's conditioning somewhere along the line.
Right, exactly. And so essentially what happens is he just kind of cleans out the town eventually. And then Brian's got to come back with his gang to try to take them back over. And we get the big, huge standoff at the end. And normally those big standoff at the end, they're kind of fun. They kind of do their thing. But in pure PM style, this one has to end in a car chase. It just ends in spectacular fashion.
Of course. It's fantastic. Well, the ending, we'll get to it. But the ending is incredible. The only other thing, we have Bo Svensson, in the movie. But he's a mainstay of many of the Italian and Spanish shot B-movies and post-apocalyptic films. So it makes sense that he's knocking about this. But he's a little ambiguous to the whole thing, or a little bit, I think he's a little bit done with the regime that he's working under. I think if it was just Brian James he'd have to deal with, he'd be fine with it. But dealing with Brian James's sniveling, beret-wearing son, who has no backbone and no idea about anything, I think is driving him a bit nuts. I think Lara recognizes that, like Lara's lone gunman kind of recognizes that, and therefore they are compatriots without necessarily, like, if Svensson came up again, Lara would kill him, but Svensson is all but, by the end of the movie, he's just like, I'm out of here kind of thing. Right. So he's sort of this interesting, ambiguous character. Brian James's presence is felt throughout the movie, despite, as I say, he's really only in few scenes at the beginning and a few scenes at the end, but you feel him throughout the movie. Like they what I call Donald Pleasance him very well. Like a lot of these B movies that Pleasance is in, he really only gave him 3 or 4 days on set, but the right directors that he worked with made that count and distributed him throughout the film in a good way. And I think Brian, similar. Brian, they do a really good job kind of, and Brian's having a ton of fun in this film. I mean, he is loving every minute of it. So the reason why I brought High Plains Drifter in, kind of one of the, well, we can start at the beginning with like some of our favorite scenes, and we'll get to it. But what were your, before we get to the favorite scenes, what was your overall thoughts? Like, if you have like a minute in an elevator to tell someone about this movie, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to say to me, like, Matt, what would be your dream, like, PM take on, like, the late 80s, you know, Serious H. Santiago post-apocalyptic thing, what would it be? I would put something together that wouldn't have been this, and I would have been wrong. This is beautiful. Like, this is what you want this movie to be without knowing this is what you want this movie to be. I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
I think that it's better at the end, I think, than it is at the beginning. I like, you know, it kind of builds well, which I think is, again, it's what you want from a good movie. You want it to sort of keep working. But I mean, it just like that sequence that because we're going to talk about our favorite scenes in a bit. It's a classic PM film in that sense that it just sort of slowly builds itself up to something that when it gets to the end, it all pays off. And I mean, Laura's a lot of fun. Like you said, Brian James is a lot of fun. It's a good way to spend. I mean, it's a little bit longer for PM. It's about 100 minutes, but it's a good way to spend 100 minutes.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've been watching a lot of movies down here while I've been working, and I've watched a few like straight to VHS horror movies from sort of the 80s and 90s that, man, even watching them just with out of the side of my eye, feel like they're only 85 minutes and they feel like 4 hours. I mean, you're watching them, you're like, does this ever reach any kind of crescendo? You know what I mean? Like, is this ever going to get good or you know?
Right.
What I then rewatched Steel Frontier today. You know, the first time I watched Steel Frontier, I watched it on my big screen, and you know, and I really couldn't believe it. I mean, I was so taken with it from the opening frame. I immediately got, I know what you say about it building and it's a little slow at the beginning, but, and it's certainly not the same rhythms that PM would deploy in other films. It feels very much its own standalone thing, even though it has, you know, a ton of PM traits throughout the movie that we could talk about. But to me, both times I watched it, so the second time I watched it, you know, hour 40 minutes or whatever that it is, they flew by. Like, even watching it again, like, they absolutely flew by. I actually think it's a very well-paced movie, and that might be because I'm getting more into the kind of Western. Well, I think what it is when I first watched the movie, I was genuinely surprised. And what I mean by that is I love PM entertainment films. But PM entertainment films tend to be like, quick, we gotta get to the bus chase right away. You know what I mean? And you have that like first 10 minutes where it's like vehicular madness and people falling through windows and explosions and blah, 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 blah. And then we kind of ease into a plot that is, the plot is decent enough to take us from action sequence to action sequence, but you don't feel, and I don't mean to be overly harsh or whatever, you don't always feel like someone's joining the dots. You can join the dots in your head while you're watching the movie, but you don't often feel like someone's joining the dots. The difference with Steel Frontier that I found is that whether it's the plot, whether it's the dialogue, whether it's the acting, or whether it's the cinematography, it's a movie that looks like it's been thought about. Do you know what I mean by that a little more? It feels like they went. It actually feels like Jacobsen Hart and Paul Volk went, let's go off into the desert. Yeah, okay, we only have 14 days or whatever, and we only have $500,000 or whatever to make the movie, but let's see what we can really achieve. And so right from the get-go, I mean, yes, of course, it's a movie that wears its influences very heavily on its sleeve, but I think it successfully does those influences. It doesn't. I never feel like the opening shot, which you've seen in I don't know how many spaghetti westerns, and even Sam Raimi does a version of it in his spaghetti western, The Quick and the Dead. But you know, you see the lone guy walking through the desert, and he finds a guy who has had a run-in with these villains that we are going to come to know over the next 90 minutes. And in this case, they found a guy without legs. He's a real man who sadly lost both his legs. They dress him up so that he's like, gory and disheveled and whatever, and he's, mouthing that help me kind of thing. And between Lara, the way that they're shooting this movie, the cinematographer, Richard Pepin, the P of PM Entertainment, as I said, it feels like they got there and they went, let's really make this look like something. Because from the establishing shot of the sort of Mad Maxy villains, and they have that like matte painting of a destroyed city in the background, driving across the desert, to the opening sequence with Joe Lara and the gentleman without legs in the desert, to then the operatic action sequence that takes place while Brian James is getting a shave. It just feels like, and I think a lot of these 95, 96, it's funny, I said when I started this podcast, like, let's kick the show off with a bang. Let's not do it chronologically. Let's do 4 or 5 of the best right up front so that people get into the show, people get into the movies, and there's a reason to keep listening. If we did the 12 City Lights movies or the first 5 PM Entertainment movies, no disrespect to them because I like them, but they're a completely different type of movie. They're not the PM that people know and love. This movie in 95 comes right in its sweet spot. It's right in that prime PM moment. And I don't know what it is. Maybe they had a little more money. Maybe they had a little more time. Or maybe they were just, between Volk, Hart, and Pepin, they were just like, let's make this the best we can make it. Because I just think this movie looks $1 million, $10 million. It looks $50 million. It looks incredible. I think that Joe Lara is the best he's been in any film that I've seen him in this movie. I think the soundtrack is tremendous. We'll get onto that later. I think Brian James and his sniveling son and Bo Svensson are the perfect antagonists for this movie. I think the violence and the stunts, I mean, the violence is pretty raw. There's some pretty, you're used to seeing people shot or used to seeing people, have a martial arts fight or whatever. But like, there's some bits during the opening sequence right up until where they have to kill a lot of the able-bodied men. They don't want able-bodied men lying around causing a problem for Brian James' son, so they kill them. Right up until that sequence, that's pretty, like, if you're in the moment with the movie, it's pretty harrowing. Like, it's not always just sort of comic book violence. So I applaud this movie. It shot right to the top of my top 5 favorite PM all-time movies when I watched it. I loved everything about it. There was, I rewatched it again now just to make sure it wasn't just because I was in the moment or just the night that I watched it or whatever. And I loved it again and again. It has some phenomenal lines in it. Everyone is acting, and like everyone is in the movie that they're meant to be in. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. There isn't one guy in it that makes you go, oh, he didn't get the memo. Everyone got the memo, right? So I'm a huge fan of this movie, and would recommend, like, if you're starting your PM Entertainment journey, or maybe you watched, I don't know, Rage and Zero Tolerance a while back, but you haven't watched anything else, I say find this, put it on, because it is it's well worth your time. It's on Foursome and Freevee and a bunch of the other streaming sites right now. So check it out. Did you watch it streaming, sir, or do you own this? Yes,
no, I did Tubi for this one. Yeah.
Okay, and was it edited or was it?
No, it was pretty bloody. There's swearing. It had everything you want in it. So
I had a bad experience with Pure Danger being edited, and I didn't. Yes. Some of the Film Rise, who I think now owns it. I think Film Rise bought out Echo Bridge. Yeah. But I think some of the Film Rise ones, just be careful, folks, if you're watching them on the free streaming channels. Some of the Film Rise ones have uploaded the edited for TV versions. Yeah. Whether Film Rise just put up the wrong one, I don't know. But just make sure. But yeah, if Steel Frontier is unedited, please, I would strongly recommend you go watch it. Matt, would you as well?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I've got it. Looking at I haven't redone my top 10 letterbox list, but this is number 9 for me now. I definitely move it there. I enjoyed this one as well. I think too, and maybe not to maybe I'm giving something away with this, but I think there are a lot of bad tropes in those late 80s post-apocalyptic films that this one doesn't go fully onto. So for example, there's no like full-on like rape scenes, you know, and so they threaten it. Yeah, they threaten it a lot, especially with Stacey Foster's character. They threaten it, but they never fully go there, which I think is a fantastic thing. You know, I think we normally you get like this scene where the main character, you know, like kind of in a Yojimbo way, right, goes through some sort of ordeal and has to, you know, recover from that ordeal. Like there's a point where like say like a Brian James gets the better of him, and maybe because they did only had Brian James for a short period, they didn't want to go that route, but they don't do it, which I think is another fantastic thing. Like I was waiting for it. I was like, oh well, you know, it's 20 minutes left of the movie. Now it's the time where he gets defeated and he's, you know, they're stringing him up, maybe they're torturing him or something like that, and then he recovers and beats them. They don't do any of that here either, which I thought was good. So definitely not was it New Barbarians, I think, the one with Fred Williamson, where that hero definitely gets it really bad.
I mean, so, there's an initiation ceremony that includes them all beating 7 shades of shit at him for reasons known only to these mad backwards bikers.
Right.
But apart from that, unlike Hologram Man, where Lara just takes it in the face the whole movie, basically.
Right.
And when we get to Hologram Man on this show, I will explain why. There is a very good reason why Lara, despite being the hero of Hologram Man, constantly is defeated. But the thing I like about this is, you know, I love a great action film. I love a great exploitation movie. I love a great post-apocalyptic movie. Like you, Matt, I don't necessarily put as much stock in needless conflict as a lot of those movies do. And actually what I love about this movie is exactly what you're saying. He is smarter and better than them. However, he doesn't like lord it over them. He uses it in a very wise way. It's sort of that. It's so funny because we were talking about Hologram Man the other day, and all through Hologram Man, they keep going, oh, he's so smart, and he's about to do a really smart thing, and then never does. Whereas Steel Frontier is sort of the movie where Joe Lara is legitimately, he's sort of the, you know, he's quiet, he's, you know, soft-spoken, he has a lot of like philosophical mumblings kind of thing that he does throughout the movie. And obviously he finds ways. I think what I really like about the movie and why it's so clever is that, and then, again, this is straight from High Plains Drifter and Yojimbo and a lot of those kind of genre-defining movies, let's put it that way, is that he finds ways around just driving into the town and killing everyone initially in order to protect, whether it's to protect the town, whether it's to protect himself, or whether it's to protect his female friend, because everyone has designs. All these meat-headed bikers have designs on Stacey Foster, and he, you know, at one point he's like playing poker with them and says, look, I'll take her as my winnings as a way to stop her getting, you know, molested by these thugs. I think it's really well done. And, you know, especially like the bait and switch where he tells everyone like, I think there's some guys in the shed, or the barn, go to the barn and blah, 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 blah. And then everyone kind of like, shoots each other, basically. Yeah. It's very reminiscent. I just recently covered with Gary Hill the Bruce Dern movie World Gone Wild, which, if you haven't seen it, it's from 1987. It is a nuclear ravaged wasteland, Earth 2087. Water is as precious as life itself. Isolated lost wells outposts survived the Holocaust, and the inhabitants guard the source of their existence. And an evil cult of renegades kind of shows up and wants their valuable water. It's very similar to that as well. And World Gone Wild is another one that is done very, very well. So if you're a fan of this one, I can and a fan of Bruce Dern, and if you're not, go away because he's a legend. But no, check out World Gone Wild as well, because it's very close to this one in the best possible way. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of this movie. I think it's one of those, as I said, where just everything comes together. I feel like everything comes together, and they really think about it correctly. And yeah, I mean, just the little back and forth. So, kind of using this as a segue into our favorite scenes. Like the whole sequence at the beginning after Brian James shows up in the town, And this bit is initially taken wholesale from High Plains Drifter, but then merges into its own thing. In High Plains Drifter, Clint Eastwood goes to get a bath and a shave, and during the shave, people come in to attack him and say, you have to get out into the town, get out into the street and like have a shootout or whatever. And he shoots through his barber gown and shoots the guy just right there while he's still all covered in shaving foam or whatever it is, and then takes out the bad guys. In this one, Brian James comes into the barbershop, sits down, says, "I'd like a shave," blah, 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 blah. He shoots the sheriff through his barber gown. And then while Brian James is having this like epic operatic, it's a very kind of Brian De Palma kind of sequence. He's getting this very like close shave and there's all this music playing. You just see outside just insane carnage. And it's a wonderful way for PM Entertainment to just be like, all right, we've got to put some more action in here. Let's just like do a 10-minute, sequence, because it's like one of those old Wild West stunt shows that you would see at old Tucson Studios or whatever. Right. There doesn't need to be a plot to the action. You know what the plot is. Brian James has shown up. He's too cool for school, so he's not going to be shooting people. He's going to have his shave. And while he's having his shave, his thugs are going to ransack the town. And therefore, in that ransackery, you can kind of do whatever you want. And it's PM Entertainment, so they do. They blow shit up, and bikes drive through windows while on fire. And Kane Hodder kicks a woman right between her legs, picks her up, and then breaks her back over his shoulder. And I was just like, what? I was like, because you see shit in PM Entertainment films, but you don't see that. Like that's a little. Yes. They're pushing the exploitation elements a little bit there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and to your point too about the budget, they also in the movie Riot, they depict a riot sequence on a budget, and they're really good. Again, with Pepin, I think it was Blakey who was Blakely was the cinematographer for Riot, but they're really good at sort of making it look like there's all this chaos going on around them, when really it's probably only a small little area that this chaos is happening. But they make that look really good, and I was struck by it. I mean, it reminded me of the Riot sequence in Riot, the way that they did it. But like you said, you get these isolated moments while you've got this sort of this chaos going. They pick these little isolated moments to show these little things that you can kind of iris in on. That was a fantastic sequence, and like you said, to kind of add in that Clint Eastwood moment of him getting the shave. It's classic PM, right? They pull things from other places, but they do it in a way that it's like an homage that you enjoy watching.
Yeah, and the whole sequence kind of ends with Brian James coming out having had his shave, surveying the devastation that his people have wrought. And Bo Svensson, who, again, kind of wants to be part of it, but kind of doesn't want any part of it. Like he's sort of in the middle there. Is sat there, and they say something along the lines of yet another great success for the Death Riders.
Yeah.
And Brian James looks, gives a 1,000-yard stare off into the distance and goes, "I've never liked that name." And Bo Svensson says, "Why not?" And he goes, "We ride as a pack. Death rides alone." And then which, by the way, phenomenal line. Like I don't care whether they took it from somewhere or whether they thought it up. Phenomenal line.
Yeah.
I never liked the Death Riders. We ride in numbers. Death rides alone. And then it cuts to the perfect, like if I was going to do a long desert road shot, it would be this. You've got the haze in the background. You've got there's like slight hills so you can see. So Lara is coming down on the motorbike from all the way in the distance. And you've got that music, that like kind of choral spaghetti western, slightly Egyptian sounding. So it's very similar for anyone who's seen Six String Samurai or Bubba Hotep. Brian Tyler plays with sort of very similar themes, but it's that kind of like slightly minor key distorted, but also epic. Like it just fits. Yeah. It fits with like that Arizona, Eastern California long stretch of desert highway, and you whoa kind of thing. And it's just what other movie do you have Brian James, like the B-movie legend, saying like death rides alone, and then it cuts to the perfect, like that's the scene you want after Brian James says death rides alone. You want Lara with his perfectly beautiful but thoroughly impractical hair blowing behind him on his motorbike, riding the desert highway with this great like cinematic score. And it's just, I don't know, man, like that won me over. I was just, that with all the violence and madness in the town, then cutting to Lara, I'm like, you are setting this up so perfectly. Like you are really established, like they set their table in this movie so well.
Yeah, no, I agree. That definitely worked there. I mean, I think, at night when he's camping and you get introduced to the roach eaters and he's like trying to deal with them. That was great stuff. And then, that next scene, that next day when he gets captured by them, that chase scene, it's classic PM. So it's the
chase scene, man, when because he shows up, that's the scene where the guy who comes out, who's not George Buckflower, but he might he looks, he's kind of got like a George Buckflower energy. He's not George Buckflower, but the guy who gets out of the car and he's got like the truck rather, and he's got like the 3-day stubble and he's got the hat, and Lara is enigmatically playing the harmonica. Like I love, like this is awesome as well. Like Lara is this harmonica player, solo writer, and they have this wonderful back and forth. The guy's like, it's hotter than devil's piss out here. Right. Which is another great line, like so good. And he's like, I'm out here looking for some runaways. And like Lara's just like, yep. He's like, whatever. And then he says, what are you? Are you a runaway? And he goes, everyone, Lara, enigmatic as always, goes, everyone's running from something. And he goes, he says, how about you? You running from something? And he goes, do I need to? And then the guy goes, throws his sunglasses on and goes to get in the truck. Lara's already like, oh shit, it's about to go down. Like I thought I could get away with just enigmatically playing the harmonica, answering his question. No. Lara's got to get on his bike and run. So he gets on his bike, and as the engine of the truck roars up, you get these drums, like these like Mad Max 2 or almost like Beyond Thunderdome kind of like, and even Fury Road, like drum, like almost like African rhythm kind of drums. And it's like, and it's funny because, look, again, I love PM Entertainment movies. Obviously, I'm doing a PM Entertainment podcast. But their soundtracks, not always the best, right? They not always. It's one where they feel like they've spent some time on the soundtrack, where they've gone, what would look fucking cool, or what would sound fucking cool with Lara being chased by, like, the budget Mad Max team. And it's the and I'm like, like I was watching it, I got so excited. Like it was just fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder because Volk is I think he's the music director as well.
Oh yeah.
I think in the credits I saw that he was the music director. So I wonder. So one of the things I think PM was known for as well is if they had extra budget, they put it somewhere. I always think of the sweeper, right, where instead of spending the money on a police precinct, they just have the chief call and leave a message on the answering machine telling, how well he's suspended.
Right.
And so then that money goes to Spiro Rosato's blowing up, oxygen tanks or whatever.
Right.
And I think it's probably a similar thing here, right? I mean, I can't imagine the set locations cost them a lot of money, right? It was probably, they're probably able to save a lot on that. And then they could put that money into other things, like you said, like the soundtrack.
Paul Volk is the musical score producer.
Right, okay, so yeah.
They have a music department on there, so it's not just sort of, library music or whatever. They actually recorded a vocalist doing that music. They have a guy doing the acoustic guitars. They have a percussion, Rick Craig, who does. So I feel like a lot of this was built and from the ground up, score wise. John Gonzalez is the guy who writes the music for this. He does the music for LA Heat, Firepower, Ring of Fire. He does Bikini Summer 3, South Beach Heat. He is the composer. Like, he composes the music for almost all these movies. So Listen, I don't know what he did right this time, but like the soundtrack to Steel Frontier is absolutely phenomenal. I love it.
Well, I wonder too, again, like if it was whether it was a time thing or, a situation where they're like, okay, let's just not recycle music from other movies. I mean, yeah, you think of, what was it Land of the Free? Is that the one with Speakman and
yes, Land of the Free has probably, and again, love PM Entertainment movies. I'm doing a PM, but Land of the Free has the worst soundtrack of any.
I mean, like that Casio for the chase scene. There's that one chase scene where there's it's like a Casio from Radio Shack.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing.
And it's funny. There's a version of Land of the Free streaming or on YouTube or something where the mix for the audio has that soundtrack at the same level as the dialogue. So in some sequences, you can't hear what people are saying. Thankfully, when I finally got it on VHS and rewatched it, or DVD, I think I have it on DVD, and I finally rewatched it, the mix was much, much better. And it didn't bother me as much this time. But when you watch it streaming or when you watch it on...
I think it's that YouTube one, I think.
Yeah, the soundtrack is just almost unbearable. But Steel Frontier, phenomenal soundtrack. Phenomenal. John Gonzalez did incredible work for this one. Yeah, so that whole thing, the car chase after the, hotter than devil's piss out here sequence. Lara's bike, we find out, has little explosive grenades that drop out of a pipe from the back of it. He has a shield that comes up on the back of his bike. He has the voice-activated Gatling gun. He just goes, Angel! And this Gatling gun, like, pops up from the back of the motorbike and just starts mowing people down. You've got, as I say, multiple cars chasing him. We get car flips, we get explosions, we get all sorts of great stuff. They do eventually capture him. We should also mention that along with a lot of kind of Western and Italian and Philippine post-apocalyptic tropes, the other thing that this movie does, I actually think kind of surprisingly, because I can't think of another Western movie that followed an Ozploitation classic and actually included what Ozploitation tends to include, which are sort of, in almost every Ozploitation movie, my favorite being Razorback, and it has perfect example in Razorback as sort of the two giggly punks with like zit face and crazy Hawaiian shirts and whatever. And they tend to talk in a very thick, like Australian accent. And they tend to be, and I think they call them ockers, which are sort of down and dirty Aussie people, basically. Like it's slang, it's Australian slang for like, the dirt and down and dirty characters. In this movie, they have two characters. They have like a kind of trash can man type of character from The Stand, who's sort of a guy who, believes to be picking up kind of messages or whatever. Yeah. And in fact, is on to Lara from the beginning, but because he's so nuts, no one really kind of understands it. But he's the guy who comes up and he's like, I know your secret, man. I know your secret. Like, so they have that character who's like straight out of a Ozploitation movie or straight out of a post-apocalyptic movie. And then they have the Chicken Man, who is, again, he's much closer to the kind of, wild and weird Ocker characters that populate Ozploitation. But I was so thrilled to see, if you're as much a fan of Ozploitation as I am, and I don't just mean Mad Max, I mean go watch some other titles. These kind of characters, whether it's Wake and Fright, Razorback, or they're in Crocodile Dundee, has a couple of them. There's some great examples in Race for the Yankee Zephyr with Donald Pleasance. Those kind of characters, the fact that PM were like, well, we've got to have a couple of nutty characters in here because that's what's in all these movies. I loved it. I loved that they did that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And funny note about this is Comeuppance reviewed this movie, and the guy who played the Chicken Man commented on their review, and he said that he wished that PM had made a sequel called Chicken Man's Revenge, that he doesn't actually die in the movie and he comes back, but he was like, yeah, I was Chicken Man in the movie, or Chicken Boy in the movie, and they were just like, hey, I in the comments they were like, here's our email, reach out, give us some more stories about making that movie. But I don't know if you ever reached out to them or not. But,
well, I will reach out to Chicken Man and I will find out exactly what went on on the set of this movie. Okay, so again, it is time for the interview section of the show. And I think this week we have really stacked up three fantastic conversations with you. First up, we talk to director, actor, and music score producer Paul G. Volk, who has basically worked on PM Entertainment films and City Lights Entertainment films forever and knows a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. He directed Steel Frontier. He also additionally directed scenes from Lion Strike, Direct Hit, and directed Sunset Strip back in 1992. He also directed episodes of the LA Heat TV series and a recent movie from 2024 called The Night They Came Home, which is a Western that has Danny Trejo in it, Robert Carradine, Philip Andre Botello, Charlie Townsend, Patrick Durham, and Brian Austin Green. Definitely worth tracking down. Anyway, so up first we have Paul Volk talking about the making of Steel Frontier. After that, we'll be speaking to Steel Frontier's writer and co-director and also an actor in the film, Jacobsen Hart, who again, as we've spoken about on the podcast many times, has written some of the classic PM Entertainment films of all time. And then lastly, we speak to Brian Huckeba, who plays none other than Chicken Boy, one of the great Death Rider gang. And he has lots of behind-the-scenes stories. He also has a fantastic YouTube channel called Huck's Pop Culture Cafe, which I would strongly suggest you go over and check out. We're going to be talking to all three coming up. But first, as always, we do have to try and cover some of the bills around here. So we will have some commercials coming up right now. Then you'll hear the interviews. Then after that, there'll be a few more commercials and back to the show. If you want to support the show, then please don't forget to rate, review, share, comment, like, follow, subscribe, tell people, tell people, tell people. Seriously, in this business of podcast, word of mouth is key. And I have to say, it has been absolutely fantastic over the last few weeks to see on both Facebook and Instagram so much interaction. We're getting a lot of comments, a lot of messages, a lot of likes, a lot of shares. That is absolutely fantastic. If you can go ahead and rate and review the podcast, or at least tell your friends and family about the podcast as well, that would be fantastic. But I have to say, please keep up all the interaction. It means so much. It's fantastic. I look forward to it every single day. And I really feel like we have an awesome action community out there who are paying attention and supporting us. So thanks so much for that. And we'll keep providing you the podcasts if you keep listening. All right. Well, first up, it is our conversation with Paul G. Volk, who is the director, an actor in the film, and music score producer. He directed a few movies for PM. One of the ones that I think most people will know for certain is either Direct Hit or Steel Frontier. Those are
Direct
both...
Hit, I just directed pickups for additional director.
Additional director, right.
I came in there. Steel Frontier, of course, I directed that. I mean, I shared the title with Joe Hart. I was very proud of Steel Frontier.
It's a fantastic mashup, sort of sort of action western.
It was a little bit more than the usual PM flicks at the time. And well, when the sound guys, the outside sound facility, got it to start working on, that they kind of confirmed that with me, because they were like, "Whoa, this is not your usual PM," which it wasn't. I mean, I think I learned a very good lesson. You got to keep cutting. It's too long. I left it too long. I probably could cut 15, 20 minutes out of it, and I was really upset about that. But you can't go back and redo it. But it was a wonderful experience. Joe Lara was a great guy.
Another PM Entertainment regular. He's in quite a few.
Right, Hologram Man, I think it was, and
you have Bo Svensson, of course, who kind of
now Bo turned out to be a real asshole.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I was from remembering him with Robert Redford in The Great Waldo Pepper. When we cast him, I was all excited, like, "Oh wow, Bo Svensson!" And then he gets to set, and he's just an asshole. Didn't happen a lot, but it happened with him. Brian James was wonderful, and just shooting it up in the Pinnacles
Yeah.
Just, yeah, that opening scene. Oh, that opening scene, that was a whole other, do you remember the movie at all?
Yes.
The opening scene up in the Pinnacles,
Yeah.
which turned out to be just Joe Lara ending the life of the legless guy. That was not written as that. It was a big action scene originally.
Right.
And the car carrier that was bringing up the vehicles broke down on the way up there. So we're sitting there waiting for the car carrier with all these different vehicles to arrive. And then we get the call, and we're in the middle of nowhere. We get the call that it broke down. You're not going to be able to shoot with that, with those. You need to rewrite the scene with what you have. Now, what we had was the legless guy. He really was legless when he had an accident when he was young. The stuntman, he's a legless stuntman, and Joe's one pistol. And so me and Joe Hart sat down. We thought about it and came up with that opening where he just happens upon the guy laying there, the legless guy who's been obviously tortured and left to die.
Yeah.
He says, "Who did this to you? Death Riders. Kill me. Kill me." And we thought that was amazing. Well, we were just so happy we could come up with something, but we felt that was a very effective thing. I don't know what other people thought. And then
it's a good Western beginning. I feel like that. The Westerns often are, whether it's the spaghetti Westerns or the earlier American ones, are very often the sort of establishing shot is whoever the lone gunman, lone hero, lone person, or whatever it is coming into town. And on their way into town, they meet some unique or
and then we continued that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was kind of an homage to Sergio Leone, the guy getting shaved while the town's being, rampaged and
all that stuff is fantastic, and I love it because I think Rick was telling me that they were happy, I guess, to move the money around as it suited the project. Is that sort of what you felt with something like Steel Frontier, or were you getting very strict directives actually?
I mean, when I think back, I think it was just we wrote enough action into the movie to feel like it should sell.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened was we were set up to do our big car chase day with a helicopter and a gyroscope at the bottom of the helicopter. Well, this was summertime up there by the Pinnacles, in basically Mojave Desert, and it was 120 some odd degrees. And after not even a half a dozen shots from the gyroscope, it broke down. It was too hot. It stopped working. So we only got a few shots, helicopter shots. We had to shoot more, from the ground, from other vehicles, which was really depressing, really, really upsetting. The fact that it was 120 people were wearing wet, towels around their necks the whole time. It was intense. So that was a bummer that we didn't get to utilize that gyroscope camera, but for a few shots. As far as money, this is a funny. Well, I don't know, it was funny at the time, but it was near the end of the movie. We were shooting the final scene, and we're shooting on film, and Rick had been in a bad mood. I don't know why. I think he had gotten bad news about something or another. I don't know if it was pertaining to the movie, because Rick shot Steel Frontier. He was the main director of photography, which I was so happy about because he's really good. But Ken Blakey was the B unit or second camera. We hardly used second cameras at all back then. Now we use 2-3 cameras all the time. But but it's digital. But so we were basically one camera. But anyway, Rick comes on set. We're about to shoot the last scene. We can tell he's upset. And Ken Blakey is shooting. He looks at me and he goes, "You have exactly this many thousand feet of film to shoot. If you don't get it with that, then you don't get it. That's it, that much." And he turned around and he walked into a car and drove away. So, and I wasn't even sure why he was so upset, but he was upset, and I could tell we have to get the ending of the movie in that amount of feet, or we're not going to get it at all. So, I as we shot the different angles and different setups, I'm looking at the side of the camera as the feet roll by. And
Right.
sometimes I even cut it just based on the feet. In my mind, I kind of divided up what we had and what we were shooting. And luckily we did get it. But then, I mean, and that was unusual because Rick is a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
Fair. And he's actually probably my favorite boss of all time at any time. We're still good friends. In fact, we get together quite often for dinner, and we play billiards, we play pool up in Lake Arrowhead, and
Nice.
yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I don't know whether this is true, but IMDb claims that Steel Frontier features the largest thing that PM Entertainment ever exploded, which is that chimney.
That silo was intense. It was crazy. But the thing was, the guy, our special effects explosion guy, Don Powers, for some reason, he decided to use an actual plunger. You never use a plunger, but he wanted to use an actual plunger.
Do the whole like you see in old movies, right? With like bank vaults and stuff.
Which is attached to the wires that go to the different bombs.
Yeah.
Well, he set it up. And we start the scene, and this scene is it's where the guy runs down the side of the silo with the rope, which is intense as it was. But then he hits the ground, and he starts to run, and then the whole thing blows up. Well, for the first take, Don Powers didn't have enough, whatever they used to blow the thing up with. So, we roll how many, I think 4 or 5 or 6 cameras, and they're all high speed. So it's like roll cam, roll cam, roll cam, roll camera. And then he does the plunger, and the explosion goes off, and it doesn't do shit. So we cut. So now he goes back and he resets up new whatever that stuff is called that explodes.
Yeah.
And little did we know he has way more than he needed. It was supposed to knock it over, but then when we reset up and we did it again, actually, on the second time, he hits the plunger and it doesn't do anything. And then he pulls it up and hits it again, pulls it up, hits it again, pulls it up, hits it again, and then it exploded. And
each time wasting that film that I see right in the camera.
Right. But it was like nerve-wracking because stop it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And he just like, which seemed like unprofessional, But so it was supposed to set up so it would fall over, and Joe Lara, the stunt double's running away from it. But he had so much of the explosive stuff in there that it basically just incinerated the whole fucking lower half of the thing, and the top half just, fell. Yeah. But rebar, I mean, I don't know if I should be saying this, but rebar with cement attached to it flew over the crew's head.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
One piece hit a crewman's car.
Yeah.
Luckily, nobody got hurt. Nobody was, but one piece of rebar with stone hit the guy's car. When it went off, there was somebody training a couple of miles away, training a Brahma bull.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Well, the bull got spooked and gored the trainer. He sued PM.
Okay.
For that.
Yes.
For that. Anyway, that's the story.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, when you do something like that, I don't know. I mean, I assume that if there are dwellings in the area, farms or whatever, that they're notified that that's happening. No? Or not? I don't know.
I don't think we thought it would be as big as it was.
Right.
Well,
I understand.
Informed, I mean, when you're shooting on a city street, you notify people.
Of course. Right.
I don't think because we were in the Kaiser Steel Mill, that was a huge facility. It was like, probably a mile long, mile wide.
And it brings up, obviously, not only, don't you have Kane Hodder in the movie? Yes.
Yes, he was in there, exactly.
You obviously work with, in PM Entertainment films, both martial arts and stunt talents like Art Camacho, Cole S. McKay, Spiro Rosatos, who we've mentioned, and Broadway Joe Murphy and so on. Talk a little bit about not only bringing those guys into the PM fold, but also, because I feel like, forgive me if I'm wrong, but PM Entertainment kind of was like, we're an open house for stunt people to come try out all the stuff they want to do. And talk a little bit about sort of the stuntmen's role in PM, how much they kind of defined the stunts, and also just sort of being able to give them a learning ground, I guess, or a proving ground, maybe.
Yeah, I never worked with Spiro.
Okay.
Actually, but I worked quite a bit with Cole McKay.
But yeah, Cole S. McKay, you definitely had, and Michael Sarna as
Michael
the stunt
Sarna was the stunt coordinator. We were a little disappointed with him because
Okay.
the bus at the end, it had that, what do they call it, where it's driving and then a big iron bar shoots out and hits the ground and sends it flying.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to send it flying, and do at least 3 or 4 tumbles. In reality, I think it only tumbled once or twice, but through the magic of different angles and editing, it looks like it tumbles a half a dozen times, I guess. But, but when it went down, we were kind of upset. We had used Cole McKay a lot prior to that. And I thought, let's try somebody new. So we pulled Michael Sarna, but I wish we would have stayed with Cole McKay, actually. Although Cole was in it. I mean, he was in it. He was a stuntman in it. We had a lot of stuntmen in it, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, stuntmen were extremely important for everything PM did, and it was a group of people, that we were used to working with. And they knew we had expectations, and they would try and outdo each other quite often, especially on the pipe ramps and the trying to get the car higher, farther, roll over
more cars at once.
No, exactly. More like the firepower coming out of the tunnel, third street. Yeah, Steel Frontier, we had more explosions than any show ever. I mean, we basically built that town of New Hope. We built that town out there, actually. All the dwellings we created, and then we blew them all up. Yeah. And just sitting or where we stationed ourselves for each explosion, it was amazing feeling that wave of heat just over us as we did the explosion. That was very, very interesting.
Okay, and now we talk to the writer and co-director of the film, Jacobsen Hart. He also had a small part in it as well. But in addition to writing, and I think this sort of goes for a lot of people at PM, because I think everyone sort of wore lots of hats, you also worked as sort of an assistant director and co-director on Lion Strike, which is almost entirely wall-to-wall action, and Steel Frontier, that I really want to dive into. How was that experience compared to writing, and did it sort of change how you approached storytelling?
Well, the second unit directing I did for Lion Strike was sort of testing the waters to see how I did on sets and how I conducted myself with all the stunt performers. And Don the Dragon was on that film. He's the star of Lion Strike. Yeah. And Paul and I directed the scene on the rooftop with the helicopter, and I think there's a shootout in the stairwell. So we filmed a lot of the action for Lion Strike, and that was sort of jumping into the deep end, and just there wasn't a lot of prep. We just kind of went for it. So as far as storytelling, I don't think that I just took everything I had up to that point with me into Steel Frontier as far as storytelling and directing action.
Yeah, Steel Frontier feels like, and whenever I talk about it, it always sounds like I'm criticizing the other movies. I'm not. It feels like everyone. It feels like you all got together and went, let's just spend just a little more time on this one and get as much of it perfect as possible. Because from the slightly kind of slower, obviously spaghetti western inspired, but still very well presented, very well shot, beautifully scored with that great kind of echoey vocal score that you have going on, to the way that the scene is set up and everything. When I watch Steel Frontier, I just feel like there is a care in it, and it allows certain things to breathe. I think about the scene where Joe Lara is by the side of the road playing the harmonica, and the guy shows up in the truck, and the whole, it's hotter than devil's piss out here, that sequence. I think about that, just the way that breathes before jumping into the action sequence. And then the lead into the action sequence has a line where he says, are you running, boy? And he says, should I be? And then it leads into the action sequence. Similarly, when Brian James looks over into the distance and says, death rides alone, and then it cuts to Joe Lara coming up over the hill. It just feels like there was an extra bit of care on that movie. Please talk about making it. Please talk about all the conversations that were had in the lead up to it. It's one of my favorites. I absolutely adore it, and I will be singing its praises for the rest of time. But am I close to? Was there a consensus effort to put more energy into this one a little bit?
I think so. I think it kind of snowballed in pre-production. Originally, it was going to be something very low budget, and I was assigned to direct it. And that came out of the blue. For me, it was a Monday morning, and I went into Joseph's office, as I'd done many times before, and we were going to talk about the next film. And he said, we're going to do something like The Road Warrior, something like Mad Max. And I said, okay. And I said, who's going to direct it? And he said, that's the kicker. You are. You and Paul. And that took me by surprise.
Yeah.
I was very happy just writing scripts for him. So I was a little intimidated at first at the prospect of directing it, but I didn't back down, and I wrote the script. Paul and I talked a little bit. Remember, we had a weekend where we went to, he had a cabin in, I think, Lake Arrowhead, and we went up there for a weekend and hashed out a story, watched a lot of movies. Yeah, the spaghetti westerns were an influence, and that was kind of my idea. I was trying to, I knew that it was going to be a Road Warrior ripoff, and I guess to add some kind of something new to it, I decided, I was watching Fistful of Dollars, and I said, let's make it like a spaghetti western also. Let's do a western in the future. And Road Warrior is kind of like a western already. So, but we embrace the spaghetti western aesthetic and the vibe of a spaghetti western, the pacing. So that kind of gave me a direction to go in, and I wrote the script. And I spent probably 3 weeks writing the script after my weekend in Lake Arrowhead with Paul.
Yeah.
And they liked the script so much, they decided to put more money into it. And that's when, Joe and Rick, and that's when Rick decided that he was going to be the DP.
Yeah.
Which is an unusual situation for a director to be working for your DP.
Right.
Usually the director tells the DP what's going to happen. In that case, sometimes it was the director asking the DP if we could do that.
Yeah.
But it was a good collaboration. I loved it. I loved working with Paul, and I loved working with Rick. And they put more money into that film than they put into prior films. And they also spent more time. A lot of times they would shoot a movie in a week and a half,
right,
or maybe 2 weeks. And we had 4 weeks on that film. 3 weeks we found a location called the Kaiser Steel Mill out in Fontana, California, kind of a desert area. And it was a closed down steel mill. They used to build ships there for World War II. And it was a massive location, and you'd drive into it, and it just looked like a post-apocalyptic war zone.
Yeah.
And other films had shot there before us, including Terminator 2. And there's a scene in Steel Frontier that takes place in a tunnel where everyone's hiding in the tunnel because the bad guys are coming.
Yeah.
And that tunnel is the same tunnel that Terminator 2 shot their opening scene in with John Connor.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I made sure when I said that, they said they were giving us a tour at the beginning. And, when we were looking at the location, they said, oh, Terminator 2 shot here. And I said, well, we're going to shoot in here too.
Yeah,
so
right.
I made sure to shoot a sequence in that tunnel because it was the same tunnel that James Cameron had shot his film in.
It feels like you were really getting to live out, a lot of your film fan fantasies to some extent.
A little bit, yeah, certainly. There was also at that location, there was thousands of tires, massive mountains of car tires, 6 or 7 mountains, 30 feet high of car tires. I don't know why they were there, but they were there, and originally the town had its own oil well, and as soon as I saw the tires, I said, we got to use these tires, and let's not have them drilling for oil. Let's have them convert these tires into fuel. which is actually possible. I had read about that in a magazine.
Yeah.
Converting old tires into fuel. And I said, let's do that. And so that's how we incorporated those tires, those piles. And it's a nice visual.
It's a fantastic visual. And it's also, again, it's that thing of, the luck that you show up at a location that has this incredible thing, visual idea, but also something that when you applied it to the story, moved it away from being just a straight, road warrior kind of film, and gave it its own thing, gave it its own idea that you haven't seen in other movies. You haven't seen tires being sort of a form of energy, and therefore, because it's a post-apocalyptic, kind of a form of currency, and so having that in there kind of, it changes it and elevates it and adds it. And while, yes, okay, you've got a few cars that have, metal plates put on them and they all look a bit beat up and post-apocalyptic and stuff like that. So obviously people go, okay, there's a little Mad Max in here. The whole movie doesn't play out like that. The whole movie plays out as, yeah, sure, I know the influences here, but this is its own thing.
I had such a love for the Road Warrior and the Terminator. I didn't want to rip the films off. I knew that they were like I said, I knew that what they were designed to be from the beginning. They were designed to sell to the same markets that bought the Road Warrior, the same people that liked those films. And so like I said, you can't really escape that, but I did what I could to give the films original thing, something original, something unique.
Yeah,
that was important to me.
And I think the again, like I said before, I think the lines, some of the more enigmatic, almost poetic lines that you're used to seeing in something like a spaghetti western, or even sort of in those early 90s, Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Kevin Smith films that were coming out at the time as well. Some of those more enigmatic kind of poetic lines are really given their due in Steel Frontier. It's not just a line of dialogue that's kind of shouted at another character as they run from kind of one action scene to another. It's you really, that vibe, whatever that vibe was that you all agreed on, I'm telling you, you hit it and then some. Like you succeeded and then some. It's some of the lines in that, especially the Hotter Than Devil's Piss scene. I absolutely love that scene, and anything that Brian James does. I'm a big fan of Brian James.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was a great experience working with him. He was a total professional and very, very easy to get along with.
Yeah.
And as soon as he got to the set, it's like, okay, what's going on? Let's do it. He was never averse to anything. He was very gung ho, and he really chewed up that dialogue. He really brought that "Death Rides Alone" line. He really brought that to life.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, it's a great moment.
It's like Jack Scalier saying, always die with your eyes open. It's got that kind of poetic, lyrical ring to it. That it's just a great thing to say. My understanding from Paul is the only issue on set, I guess, or the only grumpy actor who didn't necessarily bring their A game was Bo Svensson. He was the only one that kind of Paul was telling me was sort of a little begrudging about being there, I think. Is that right, or is that just what Paul remembers?
Bo Svensson was that film maybe was a little below his pay grade. He was, and I don't necessarily mean that financially. I mean, Bo Svensson is a professional, and he had been around for a long time, and he was making great films back in the 70s. I mean, he was in the Great Waldo Pepper. And Bo Svensson's a terrific actor, and he brought a professionalism that we didn't necessarily match. I think that he was very patient with the production. I remember at one point, there's a scene where there's candles on the wall, and he was standing next to a wall, and one of the candles fell on him, and so hot wax fell on him, and we all saw it, and Paul and I know I just stiffened up. I was like, oh no, because because Bo was not a guy who was afraid to tell you what was on his mind. And he always had ideas. And one of my regrets is not listening to more of his ideas, because he had some pretty cool ideas, but we were in motion, and we tried to incorporate some of them.
Yeah.
But you can't incorporate all of them. And he brought ideas all the time. And I liked Bo a lot, but he was he wasn't as patient as Brian James.
Yeah. Which is the only reason that's a little odd to me is, yes, I know his history from the 70s and before, and some of the movies that he made. He obviously also took over from Joe Don Baker in the role of Buford Pusser for The Walking Tall, both the movies and the TV series and other things like that. But it's, he had been making, middle to low budget movies really throughout the 80s. He does horror films and post-apocalyptic movies and action films, all with either budgets comparable or even lower. I mean, he works with Fred the Hammer Williamson, who I know never spent over $100,000 on a movie. We were all like $50,000, $60,000 movies. He worked with him a few times in Delta Force Commando and 3 Days to a Kill. He worked on movies like Curse 2, The Bite, and Primal Rage, and he had done his fair share of B movies. It's just odd to me that he would get to Steel Frontier, which I think, just based on watching it, probably had at least a better production value and set than some of those others. But maybe that was just his mood and style, I guess. I don't know. When I say he made that pay grade comment, it's more like what I mean to say is he had done several A pictures. Right. He had done several big Hollywood studio productions. So he came onto our set, and it was, I think it was a little more low budget than, I don't know. Maybe he had done tons of low budget films. I wasn't too familiar with his catalog at the time. I know after Steel Frontier, the next thing he did was Speed 2. Yeah, it's weird. So he jumps back into like a big Hollywood picture in Speed 2. Yeah, definitely. But he said, when I mentioned his patience, when the candle wax fell on him, I thought he was going to go through the roof, but actually he was very cool. Okay. So I think that was the third week of production, and so I think he had finally sort of settled into what he was involved with. Yeah. But I remember we decided to cut his last scene, and Paul and I, one of us had to tell him, and we didn't want to because we were kind of scared. Not physically, but he's an imposing guy. He's probably 6'5". Yeah. I don't know. He's a big guy and very serious. And we flipped a coin to see who would go and tell him, and I lost. So I remember he would sit in the hotel lobby, and he kind of held court in the lobby. He would sit there for a long time, and, various days. And I remember walking down the hallway toward him, and I was like, my heart was beating because I'm like, I'm going to have to cut his scene. I don't know if he's going to like this. And I sat down, I said, "Good morning, Bo." And he said, "Good morning, how are you?" I said, "Good." I said, well, we talked a little bit, and I said, we decided that we need to cut the last scene. He says, "Oh, terrific." I think that's a good idea. What? He was probably happy to get out of there soon. He got his fight in the desert though with the roach eaters. Yeah, he choreographed that fight scene. That was great. Yeah, it was. I was really impressed with that. He choreographed that fight scene because he got his moment. You gave Bo Svensson his moment. You know what I mean? And that's what I love about these guys. Yeah, that had a good cast too. It was great cast. Brian, him, and Joe Lara, and that was the second film that I worked on with Stacey Foster, who was this terrific actress. Yeah, she's great in the movie. She was also in Cybertracker, and after she did Cybertracker, I thought she was so good, I suggested that we cast her in Steel Frontier, and that went over well. I really liked working with her. She's very talented. And then we had Kane Hodder. Yeah. And Kane came in at the last minute because a stuntman was going to play his role. And then the stuntman broke his leg. And so they cast Kane Hodder to come in. And Kane, who played Jason in Friday the 13th, several of those films, you may notice he's wearing a beret with a Jason image on the beret. Oh, yes.
And that was Kane's idea. He said, "Can I wear this Jason and patch on my hat?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" He was fun to work with. He wanted more dialogue, but I think he was upset that we didn't give him more dialogue. I said, "Well, he's kind of the strong silent type, you know. He's the assassin of the bunch. He's the one who mans the 50 cal and cuts down half the village."
Yeah, he has a scene that when I first watched the movie, you know, I mean, obviously I've watched all sorts of grindhouse movies and exploitation movies. I'm used to violence and things and action sequences, but I hadn't seen a PM Entertainment movie before where a thug kicked a woman between the legs,
that was his idea.
and then broke her back over his shoulder. I was a little bit like, oh, PM Entertainment goes a little grindhouse in this movie. Okay, that's fine. I love it. I'm digging it. But it was certainly a moment.
I remember when we shot that was Kane's idea.
Yeah.
He choreographed that little piece. He says it's never been done before in a movie, and I said, "Okay, let's do it."
Yeah. No, it's
and the stunt woman was down for it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a movie that I think, and I think all the better for it. I think that it will live longer because of this. But I think we were talking about this with my friend Matt, and he said what's nice about Steel Frontier is it dances up to the line of exploitation just enough. It never, other movies like it always go, especially the Italian ones or the Filipino ones or whatever, always push it more into the grindhouse, especially when it comes to abuse against women, especially sexual abuse. There's always a scene in one of those movies where you kind of think, especially as you get older, you start to have the less sort of childish interests of true exploitation when you're, in your 20s or whatever. You start to get a bit older and you love action movies and you love exploitation, but you don't want it always to go to a point where it becomes uncomfortable. And Steel Frontier never does. It goes up to that line a few times, which is perfect because all you need that is to establish that these guys mean business, that they're terrible people, that when they get killed or when they get beaten up, it's absolutely fine. But there are some decisions in the movie that you never cross that line. And I think that because of that, it becomes a movie that you can watch over and over again, because as aggressive and terrible as the Death Riders are, that it's never rammed down your face, especially the sexual violence.
Yeah, my sensibilities has usually been to try to leave as much of that up to the imagination as I can.
Yeah.
That's just my own personal sensibilities. In those films, PM, they were an exploitation company in that they didn't necessarily exploit sex and blood. No. They exploited explosions and car stunts.
Right, which is fine because that feels fantastical enough that you can, while you love it and it excites you and it draws you into the movie, you don't believe that it's going to happen when you walk out your door. You know what I mean? Necessarily. Similarly with Steel Frontier, I think the decision when they, one of the hardest scenes in the movie to some extent, if you're emotionally invested in it, which I apparently was when I watched it, is when they gun down all the able men in town without any kind of remorse. But you make the decision, or you did in the editing suite, either way, not to show it. Instead, you show the reaction of the women and the older people in town to what was a horrible massacre. And I think that is a lot more affecting. It hits you a lot harder because your brain paints a picture. Oh my goodness, what would it feel like if I saw my loved ones gunned down in such a barbaric way, than if you showed it in some kind of, Sam Peckinpah blood explosion or something.
Well, that's how I felt at the time, even when I wrote it. We didn't film the guys getting hit. We decided not to film it, so it was a choice made in the writing. And that, I'm okay with blood. I have no problem with blood.
Me too, yeah.
But I think it should be sort of I don't like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, if it can be implied, imply it there, and then when you show the blood later in some other scene, it hopefully will have more impact.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have shown guys getting shot, but my thinking was, what for? You know what's happening. You want to show people getting shot when it's a surprise or when it's when it's maybe a character that you care about, that you've gotten to know.
Yeah.
So it has more of an impact, more of a personal impact. But when it's just non-characters, background performers, and it's designed to show how bad the villains are, I didn't see any reason to show the bloodshed. I thought it would just be gratuitous, and it wouldn't have any impact.
No.
So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah.
Because it was a choice, and when you make choices like that, you don't necessarily know if it's the right choice. You just kind of feel it out and go with your instincts.
Well, I think
we could have shot a bunch of squibs, but we didn't.
It also comes off the back of the, that huge montage of violence that's juxtaposed with Brian James getting a shave that has a lot of violence in it. And I think that it was also not necessary to add to that. Like, I think you already know what they're capable of, and then they're going to do ultimately the unthinkable, and that they do that, but it's off screen. I just think it's very affecting. As I say, it's Steel Frontier, so it's a triumph and a great achievement. And lastly, here's our fantastic conversation with Chicken Boy himself, Brian Huckeba. Brian, thanks ever so much for being on the show. But Steel Frontier was a PM movie that I only recently discovered, and since I have done, I've been completely obsessed with.
As you should.
Of course.
A masterpiece.
And the thing is that, and I got a lovely comment the other day. I was standing online to meet Joe Bob Briggs, and I was chatting, as you do when you're at those kind of con things and stuff, people online, and we all got to chatting because we're all very similar movie nerds. And I was chatting away about PM Entertainment, and a chap came out of having seen Joe Bob and I heard you talking about PM Entertainment earlier. Are you the PM Entertainment podcast? I'm like, I am, yeah.
What?
And he goes, I just downloaded your second episode to listen on the drive up here. I really love the way, and this is why I brought it up, because I really love the way that you're not snarky about the movies. So many people are snarky about them or watch them ironically or whatever. And he said, you genuinely seem to love them. So when I call Steel Frontier a masterpiece, I mean it's a masterpiece. I genuinely love it.
Yeah. PM was sort of the low budget action stuff and sci-fi. And they knew how to blow stuff up. And Steel Frontier is like the epitome of blowing stuff up to perfection, like the school bus and that tower. We had a local news thing come out to watch us drop that tower that you saw. And I don't know if you know, I'm sure you've talked to the other fellas, but the tower was actually supposed to fall over like this.
Yes.
But it dropped straight down, and it still looked like a really boss. Oh, it just dropped. Yeah, and it was startling too. Everyone was on rooftops, and we were all 100 yards away or whatever they told us was the safety distance.
Yeah,
and we all just sort of waited. We didn't even hear here it comes. At some point, we just started talking, and we just started boom, and we had to turn our heads to see it fall because there was no 3, 2, 1, or it was, but they were so far away we couldn't hear the countdown.
Right. And poor Joe Lara is having to run away from the damn thing. I can't even imagine what he was going through.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. Especially with modern eyes, when you go back and watch something that for 100% was done for real, in camera, by actual humans, there is such an excitement there and such a sort of not to use a lofty term, but like a frisson that you don't get watching any CGI. I don't care how good CGI is.
It's so true.
It's, and even that shot at the beginning when you're all riding along and they've sort of done the matte painting of the kind of destroyed world behind you. Even some people might look at that and be like, oh, that's a cheesy effect. I love that stuff.
Oh, I love it too, dude. In fact, can I tell you, when we actually had a screening, which I loved. It was I've never been part of a screening before. And it was also like a gas just to see my name up on there. And it was with Jim Cody Williams and Robert O'Reilly. And I love both of those guys. So the fact that the three of us are on, we have the tag together just thrills me beyond belief. Because I'm also a Star Trek fan. So when Robert O'Reilly was there, I'm like, oh, freaking Gowron is in this movie.
Yes.
This was just the best thing ever. And the stuntman, Jeff Imada, right, who did all of Joe Lara's stunts, did the rappel, and I met him, by one of the trucks, just talking to him. I'm like, just picking his brain about doing stunts. And he told me he was the stuntman for Brandon Lee in The Crow.
Right.
And then he told me his story about Brandon, which was super heartfelt. And the pants he was wearing, he goes, and just so you know, the pants I'm wearing, these are the pants I wore in The Crow. I was like, dude, everything about this movie, he just had so much karma.
Yes.
Cool. And freaking Kane Hodder, like Jason Voorhees is in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, you have some, I mean, the character actors and sort of B-movie heavyweights that are in this movie, Brian James, Bo Svensson, Kane Hodder, Jim Cody Williams. This cast list, and I think this is what's amazing about Steel Frontier is that obviously it's PM Entertainment shot at doing a post-apocalyptic Western road movie kind of thing. So it has all the genre tropes that you would hope and want and expect from that kind of film. But not only that, they do each of those genre tropes really, really well, to the point where you kind of go, wow, as much as I love PM, and I always sound like I'm slagging off the rest of PM when I say this, but it feels like PM has really stepped up their game with Steel Frontier. It feels like they took just that extra half an hour or an hour or 2 hours to make each scene just a little extra. You've got Rick Pepin behind the camera, giving it all that he's got as a cinematographer.
Oh, yeah. He was great. He was great.
Yeah. You've got, obviously, Paul Volk, who'd worked on 100 PM movies at that point. You've got Jacobsen Hart, one of their best writers. But then, for a post-apocalyptic Western movie, for fans, you want Brian James, you want Bo Svensson, you want these guys, Kane Hodder, whatever, you want these guys in there. And the fact that PM went out to those guys and got, if you're a straight-to-video fan, they got, to me, like the A-list, and I love that about the movie.
Yeah, and you could feel it on the set. When I was, if you want, I can talk to you about the casting part if you want.
Yes, please. I mean, my first question is obviously, how did you come to work for PM and why especially Steel Frontier?
Okay, I have a really great story how I got this part.
Great.
I don't even think I've told either of the directors, Paul or Jacobsen.
Yeah.
So I was there, and my manager got me this audition for Steel Frontier, Chicken Boy, right? And just on paper, I'm like, what is this character? What is it? Like, other than the absurd name and the fact that it subtly repeats kind of everything everybody else says, there wasn't a lot to go on, right? So I get there, and I'm sitting next to the door to go in. Yeah, I'm not intentionally, just that was the seat I was in. And I could hear them. There was an actor in there and they were giving him all this direction. Like he wasn't there. He just wasn't, like he was kind of nerdy looking, sort of like me, like strange, but he wasn't dialing it in what they want. But I was listening to everything they told him to go out and work on.
Yeah.
So when I went in, I hate to say this, but when I went in, I knew everything they were looking for, which is helpful. I mean, sometimes they're supposed to tell you that anyway. Like when you go in, you go, okay, how would you like, do you see this a certain way? Would you like me to do another take? Like, because I would have just done my first instinct and then ask them, would you like to see it another way? And if you're really far off, they said no, they'll say stuff like no, thank you. But if you're close, then they do what they did with that guy is they give him tips and send him out. But dude, so when they go, okay, you ready? I go, yes. And then I looked around my space. I go, is it okay if I have this whole space to work in? And I'm telling you, it was like a living room kind of thing. And they would sort of look at each other. And I didn't know these were the writers and directors. Right. Because I was just there to meet Adrienne and Michelle. So this was already like the callback situation like that I was in. So right. I was after the fact. And so I just, started moving the head, it's a chicken, right? So I'm just darting my head around, and, just twitching like a chicken. And then of course I would just got a little bit of psycho in the eyes and just was very like, I don't know, just, I heard what they wanted and I dialed it all in. And then, when it was over, I was just like, I felt really good. And then I went home and then 2 weeks went by. I'm like, I don't believe this. I killed it in there. Like, I know, like to not even get a call back or something. I was just like, I don't know how this town works then. I thought, and I also did this thing with my hair. I said, I just took my hair and I just messed it up like this. So my hair was literally sticking out like you see it in the movie.
Yeah.
Or more so. But I thought, I have to go for it. I have to do everything physically. So hair was out to here, the twitching. And then 2 weeks later, my manager calls and she goes, "Hey, it's me, Melissa." I'm like, "Oh, hey. So what's up?" She goes, "Oh, yeah. So you know that movie you auditioned for, Still Frontier?" I'm like, "Oh, you're kidding." I mean, she was totally playing me. She made it sound like I didn't get it. She goes, "Yeah, so you got the part." Like she did it like that. And I was like, "What?"
That's
like,
fantastic. Yeah.
It was so, I loved how like she just toyed with me a little bit. And then it was just heaven from there. And I did, this great little thing. I learned that Adriana Michelle, she liked pies. And so you try to say thank you in a very special way. So, dude, I went straight, found out what her favorite pie was. I went and bought that pie, and I drove that pie to PM Entertainment and just knocked on the door. Stuff you can't even do nowadays. You can't even go like to a casting play. I mean, like, you got to have like credentials and your name on a list and this.
Right.
I just went there, knocked on the door, brought in, gave her a pie. And she was so happy. She's like, "What is this for?" I'm like, "I'm thanking you for bringing me in." She goes, "Oh my God, no one has ever done this for me." I'm like, "Really? There are a lot of thankless actors then."
Right, exactly. Good for you,
I
sir.
appreciate
Good for you.
this,
No, that's fantastic. What a great story of how you got cast. Yeah, it's interesting. Your character, Chicken Man, as I said, PM Entertainment certainly knew their genre tropes when they were making straight-to-video versions of blockbusters and things like that. But that sort of comic relief, weirdo sidekick, often a kind of a grotesque character, it very much appears in exploitation films.
Oh, yeah.
And some American post-apocalyptic movies. But weirdly, for most of the other companies that tried to kind of ape those movies or do their own versions of them, and I'm thinking particularly of the huge rash of Italian films that came out after Mad Max, they never included that kind of character. And it wasn't
Comic
just
character, yeah. And I knew that's what I was being cast for.
Right. And I wonder,
because there is no other comedy in the entire film.
Right. Exactly. And did you have that frame of reference as a movie fan? Did you have that frame of reference that you'd seen some of those sort of, not just the Mad Max films, but some of those 70s Australian movies that often have those characters, like Razorback, for example, has two characters who drive around in trucks, and they're not chicken men, but they have like the punk, Hawaiian shirts on and the suspenders and the spiky hair and and they talk in like wiry, crazy voices. They're sort of throughout the exploitation genre. And I wondered if you had a frame of reference before you sort of crafted the character.
Yeah. I mean, I did know that going into it, that's who I was put into this film to be. Right.
Yeah.
And so piggybacking off of characters like that, I just thought, okay. Oh, and by the way, so this is also what helped the character come around. So the a lot of people, they kind of just had their wardrobe. I'm not sure how they did it actually, because I wasn't with their wardrobe. But for me, the wardrobe, she asked me to come in. She goes, "All right, I want you to come into our wardrobe department, and we're going to create this costume." I was like, "Oh my God, this." So really, I just got to look at anything that was absurd and point to it. Like that weird, like Indian bone plate that I'm wearing. I just saw that sitting on the ground. I'm like, I want to wear that. And then I want to wear, the only thing that they had pre-made for me was that gorgeous jacket with the feathers.
Yes.
Like just the plumage was just like, oh, I just put it on. I'm like, oh,
did you get to keep it, or did they keep it?
Dude, I look, I was like, there was no one else that could have played this part. That's what I say, right? I go, "Can I have this costume?" And they go, "Well, not right now, because we might need to do reshoots." I'm like, but they didn't tell me I was going to be part of the reshoot. So I'm like, well, who on earth would you get to wear it if it's not me?
Right.
But I understand that. So in case there's reshoots, don't take it home yet. But because then there were no reshoots because we nailed it, I never got to see them again and see the costume again.
Yeah.
So who knows where it is, but
it should be in the Smithsonian. It should be.
Right.
If the world was the way it should be.
Well, it's funny because even every little detail. So as we're putting it together, I realized one thing like about this character. And this is something that came around just doing this costume is I'm like, why am I wearing this stuff? What is all this stuff on me? Like none of it makes sense. And so I knew, according to one of the scenes, as you know, with Bacchus, as he's about to like do bad things to Stacey Foster's character. "You want to watch, boy? Huh? Well, you want to watch? Watch me rattle your mama's teeth." Right? My backstory to that was we do this all the time. Right. And the other backstory is that Bacchus saved me from something. He saved me from dying. So that's why I am beholden to him completely. And then aside from that, all the things on me are pieces of stuff people wore. So the glasses is from one girl. The bracelets and the rings I was wearing and the gloves were all from other people.
Yeah.
And I even took the glasses and I popped one of the lenses out. So that if you look, one of the lenses is always missing because, they got in a fight or he shot her eye out or something. So I just wanted it as just a crazy. In fact, in the scene, as we're driving, and he hits me and I go flying into the back seat. I do my own stunt. Thank you very much. If you look carefully, one of the things comes flying off my wrist because it wasn't, and it's gone forever. I don't know where it is. It's in that desert bed somewhere.
Was there any other or any different inspiration you drew from anyone else, or any other kind of films that you were a fan of for your performance, or were you much more interested in like what you seem to be saying, which is creating the character's backstory, using the costume to inform a lot of it, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for me, that's exactly how this whole character came about because it was so strange on page what to do with it. And certainly I love these type of movies. I've always been a fan of, the dystopian futures or just sci-fi in general and action. This type of movie is in my wheelhouse. So I didn't base anything I did on any other character I'd ever seen. It was all based on what I heard them tell the other actor, which is, that sort of like, he's sort of traumatized a little bit. He's kind of twitchy and like all this stuff. And so I'm like, okay. So I had to figure out why he's that way. What put him there? And then of course, walking me into the wardrobe department, creating it was all just sort of manifesting itself. Like as we were getting closer to shooting, every little step just created another little piece to the character. So when we rolled for that first day, I was just like, I was in character. I was ready to go. I was this nut job bouncing around on tires in the background while Jim Cody's like hitting on a girl. And I'm like,
right. And there seems to be, as you said, the Death Riders.
Death Riders.
There's a ton of character actors that we've been talking about, and Kane Hodder, who's sort of a stuntman actor, and so on and so forth. Was there a lot of camaraderie? Did you guys spend time either before the film or during the film when you weren't on set shooting, kind of formulating your group and getting to know each other and all that kind of stuff? Or was it just when the cameras were rolling?
Well, it's yes to some of that because I wasn't in the scene with a lot of like Green Street, Alfonso who was in the movie as well.
Yeah.
Some of those guys I was just in those like the bar scene. The bar scene, by the way. And like, I love Jim Cody because Jim Cody will just make up any dialogue. He was not beholden to that script. Sorry to Jacob who wrote the script, but Jim Cody would just go. He would say whatever he wanted. I think the whole thing, like the girl reference to Chicken Boy, so they said something like, "What'd you bring her in here for?" And Stacy was there, and he points to me and goes, "Her?" And I'm like, "What?" And I look like, "What do you mean me?" He goes, "No, her." I was like all that was just improvised. None of that was on paper. Yeah. So, but Jim Cody, because I spent so much time with him, he and I became friends after the movie. I'm an editor by trade, so I did tons of actors demos. So for the longest time, Jim Cody would come to me and I'd work on his demos, for whenever he needed them. So yeah, he and I are still friends today. So and then Stacy as well. Like Stacy, I don't talk to her much, but because we run a few scenes with her as well, we would just bond during, when we weren't rolling the camera. So the more people I had in the scenes with me, the closer I bonded with them. And then even Robert O'Reilly, I would see him at like sci-fi conventions because, still a sci-fi nerd. So I go to my sci-fi conventions and he recognizes me every time. He's like, there he is. I'm like, he does the thing. And it's good. It was a great bunch of people. Like I couldn't have asked for this is my first official film. Yeah. And I couldn't have asked for a better one.
Yeah, of course. And you had Paul Volk, Jacobsen Hart, you had Rick on set shooting it. Obviously, those are three guys who probably all have their own view of how stuff should be done. They're all obviously working close together as sort of writer, director, and cinematographer. Talk a little bit about what that dynamic was like or what you kind of observed about that collaboration between the three of them.
So I had more contact with the two directors, right?
Right.
And so it was just kind of fun to watch because they were also in the film as well, as you know, like some
Yes,
little
yeah,
side characters, because they wanted to have fun. They could tell this was going to be a fun one to do. And I was also very fascinated with the process. So I went to, see Paul do stuff. I went and asked him, could I have a movie poster? Because I was so excited. My name is on the poster.
Yeah.
Like, how is my name on the poster? I mean, there are guys like Robert O'Reilly is not on the poster. Like, he had way more credits than me.
Yeah.
So it's all about just performance and how you conduct yourself. And I was always so just thankful at every step of the way. And I went in to watch him. He was doing music at the time because Paul did the music. So it was kind of fascinating to watch them work. And, and Pepin he was great. Like, I learned a lot from him. Like when I spin around and do the want to watch that whole thing at the end. That camera, could not have been closer to my face. It was in my face. And it was almost impossible to not look down the throat of that lens because the lens was right here. So I had to really focus. I had to pick something in the husk of the lens cap and just stare at that with every ounce and still perform. So, so these guys just really were a thrill to watch every step of the way. We had a really loaded team on this. Like, everybody came to make this one work, and
it being your first film, there must have been some things on it where you were like, wow, they're really going to do this.
Well, I will tell you, something very interesting happened with me on this film, which is I was so excited. I had a camcorder and I asked them, hey, is it okay when I'm not shooting? Can I just come and shoot behind the scenes stuff? So, dude, I have all this behind the scenes footage because there was no BTS company.
Wait, you're kidding me. That's seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's the scene. So in the little town part, where like the motorcycle's dragging that lady, remember the stunt woman?
Yeah.
And one motorcycle jumps over a barrel and the barrel blows up, and the other one drives by and it's dragging the woman. I recorded all that behind the scenes stuff, and then so I could literally. It's funny I'm doing this with you because I've said on my channel I'm going to do a PM thing too. Maybe I'll bring you on that. And I want to use this stuff and cut it in. I was going to have Paul and a guy called Joe to do this as well. That's why when he called you, I was like in the mindset. I'm like, oh my God, this is so funny. And I had this footage of me holding like an M16. And I'm like, when the hell was I holding that gun? Like, I have no memory of that. Like, it was so bizarre.
So have you edited, as an editor by trade, have you put together sort of your own behind the scenes thing, or is it still just sort of
Well, I finally
digitized.
I digitized it all and I have it all in standby. But what I was going to wait and do is once I've interviewed like Paul and, I want to call Jim Cody and see if Robert will come on as well. If I can get that as story, sort of like what you're doing as well, and piece it together, then I have something to roll on top of it and really make it something special. So that's what I'm hoping to actually do with it. This doesn't exist anywhere else except right here.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, look at all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's insane. And I'm very excited about that. I've already subscribed to you on YouTube, so I will
thank you.
I will look out for that. Yeah, I followed you and subscribed to your stuff because I want to see what you're doing. I watched a few of your videos. They're awesome. They're great. I really enjoyed I watched one where you were going to your local thrift stores, which is something that I do on a weekly basis. So it was fun to see the kind of stuff you were picking up. So yeah, we'll look forward to seeing that then. Are there stories about Steel Frontier that we haven't got into yet, that my questions haven't elicited a story that I don't want to pass by?
I mean, just for the audience, because I don't know how much they know, but I'll break it down just into the simplest things of dressing rooms. So this is my first dressing room, had my name on it. Like, it's, it's this bank of, it's like a little 18-wheeler, and in it is little skinny, like you can put your arms out and probably touch the sides, right? So it's just enough to have a little cot to lay on so you can rest, but then there's like a sink, a toilet, and like a hanger, so if you need to hang your costumes up,
right?
And then, I mean, dude, and there was like a TV up there with a radio. Like, to me, that was everything. I was like driving a Rolls Royce, man. Like, I was like, this is for me. And just from that, and I'll tell you, like, I even took a photo there. I did one of these little, like selfies into the mirror, because I never put the entire costume on until this shooting day.
Right.
And they handed me all the pieces and I went into this thing and I put it all on. I'm like, oh my God, look at this thing I'm wearing. And dude, when I popped out of the thing, like all the crew was sitting there and everyone just looked like, oh my God, like what is this guy? I'm like feather jacket and all this stuff. I mean, it was just from the start, like every little thing of this movie was just electric. So, the room and, coming out and just the dressing room, I don't know. It was so great. And the caterers were amazing. Even the caterers. I have a photo of me with Bo Svensson right next to the caterers. That was hilarious. He's like eating a sandwich. And I'm like, hey.
I'm really surprised to hear. I mean, I'm not surprised here, but I don't think I ever thought of PM as having even remote behind the scenes creature comforts, just because I'd always heard that they basically put all the budget into the movie. And therefore I just assumed the cast hung out, I don't know, in their cars or whatever. Like
like in a tent or something.
Right. I'm pleased to hear that there was at least food and a little room on set for you guys.
Absolutely. I
mean,
it's
fantastic.
Like I know Joe had a little bit bigger. He didn't have a skinny thing like we did. Joe Lara, he had a little bit bigger trailer.
Yes.
But
yeah. But yeah, I mean, did you? I mean, I know you're not in a ton of scenes with him, but like, what was Joe Lara on set? Because he comes across as very sort of enigmatic, I guess. But was he like that in person?
Yeah, I mean, he seemed like when he gets to work, he's ready to work. He seems very focused, at least the scenes I'm in with. And then some I would just stick around and watch. Like when I was done for the day, oftentimes I didn't just leave. Like I wanted to keep watching other people shoot stuff.
Sure.
Because I love the process. I always have loved filmmaking, and to watch these guys, these masters, like shoot these things. But Joe was like and then every once in a while, because I was the comic relief, I would make him laugh. If I could make Joe laugh, I was having a good day. Yeah. But I also knew when to leave him alone because he had like an intense scene with Stacy coming up, and they had to. So that's when I took off with Jim Cody and Robert O'Reilly, and we just yucked it up and told hilarious stories.
That's what made me laugh earlier when you were saying about the stuntman that you were talking to, because obviously one of the things that struck me when watching Steel Frontier is, and in fact there's a couple of other PM films where everyone has those like that long, like late 80s, early 90s, like either grunge or metal hair, like they have that long hair that was a trend back then. And I'm like, not practical for fighting and not practical for motorbike riding and not practical for stunts at all. Right. Because, there's points where Joe Lara's hair is like all over his face. I'm like, he can't see who he's hitting or what he's fighting.
It's so much hair.
Yeah. But then obviously Brandon Lee had long, lank hair in The Crow as well. So obviously the stuntman, he had long hair, or did he wear a wig, or did you talk to him about?
Jeff had long hair as well. I don't think it was as long as Joe's. So when he did the stunts, I think he might have been wearing a wig. Yeah. But Jeff had long hair too. Yeah, it was a fantastic crew. I'm going to give you a very funny story that no one knows. So you see us driving in this scene, right? I'm in the car, right? And it's a sweet caddy, where you like Bacchus has the red Cadillac. And then so we shoot the scene. The next day, the car's missing. It's gone. It's stolen. Where is it? No one can find this car. So if you see us drive in, do you notice that Bacchus gets out of the passenger side of someone else's car? And I'm walking in like this. I'm like chasing the cars. I'm like, what am I doing on the ground? Right. It's because there was no car. And so if you're kind of aware of that, it's like, where's the red Cadillac? It was missing. So that's why I was asked to just walk behind the cars. Of course, now I'm sucking in all this dirt and everything. I was getting wind after every take. I was putting like full chicken boy into those takes.
Yeah.
And then I'm like to catch your breath because of that dust and stuff. It took a while. So when they're like, back to one, I'm like, hang on a second.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need 5 minutes.
Right.
Because everyone else is sitting in a car, not breathing in this dirt. I'm walking right behind the car. Just
you should have worn a big fake beak that you could have breathed through. You could have put a face mask underneath a beak or something.
Or wear like a lady scarf. Because apparently I take everything that Bacchus has he's taken. I take a piece of it. So it would have made sense to have like a full lady scarf around my face. I did not. So I
No.
sucked in after that.
Which also makes a weird thing because obviously there's that thing in Muppet movies where Gonzo is running around with a chicken, Camilla, his chicken,
Right.
Camilla.
Right.
And you're always like, well, what is Gonzo? I know later on they said he was an alien, but like, you're like, first of all, what is Gonzo? And is he romantically in love with the chicken? Like, what's going on with the chicken, right? Well, it sort of makes Bacchus and you then, I guess, make a Gonzo and Camilla in a weird way of Steel Frontier. If he's giving you all the sort of women's...
That's the funniest reference I've ever heard.
Cast-offs. Well, when anyone says chickens, the first thought I go to is Gonzo. That's always my that's my go-to is because Gonzo always just has a fleet of chickens around him, and you just don't question it. You're just you know when you grow up with the Muppets, you're just like, I guess he likes chickens.
Yeah, Gonzo is the chicken guy. Yeah. So I started a YouTube channel called Huck's Pop Culture Cafe. So I name it after my last name, which is Huckeba. So it's my nickname growing up is Huck, because there was already a couple of Brians in the collecting community.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I can't do another Brian something, so let's just do Huck. And so now I'm just known the community over as Huck. And I do morning shows every single Tuesday. I did one this morning. And it's always about box office and new releases and movie news and stuff like that. It's super fun. And then, anything else physical or media related or just pop culture related, because I didn't want to just pigeonhole it about physical media. That's why I made it the Pop Culture Cafe. So now I can talk about toys, or I could talk about just going to the cinema, like anything that's sort of, connected to pop culture as part of the channel. And it's whatever idea I come up with is what I shoot. And then I put it up. I do challenges sometimes with the communities. Like, all right, let's pretend you're on a remote. Here we are. We're going to come up with a new one right now.
Yeah.
So I would do these things about if you're on a movie deserted island and you can only bring one movie for every letter of the alphabet, what would you bring?
Right.
And so I did mine. And then all of a sudden people love that. So everyone started doing their, you can only bring one. So like now I wonder if we could do like a little post-apocalyptic type
Yes.
thing, and put that challenge out. Like if you could pick 5 post-apocalyptic movies to bring to that island, we'll see what people come up with.
Yeah.
And that, and tell them you can't just lean on Mad Max. You have to dive deeper than that.
Oh yeah. I would almost say like any Mad Max should be off the table.
Yeah.
It should be except
exactly.
Mad Max.
Steel Frontier is rated R, right? Which is funny because by today's standards, it doesn't feel like an R-rated film. It just has lots of violence. There's very little swearing and there's no nudity. It's funny. This is the first, my daughter, I have a daughter who's 17 now. A couple of years ago, this was the first R-rated movie I showed her, was Daddy's movie.
Nice, of course.
And that was pretty fun. I'm like, all right, you're about to watch something. I'm just going to warn you.
Yes.
And it was nothing like the violence was, I think kids are just desensitized or something. Like nothing shocked her.
No.
And she liked it. So.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, again, I don't know anyone who generally likes film who would watch this and not enjoy it. I would be very surprised if someone didn't get something out of it because there's just enough. There's just enough going on, all the time. So as we wrap up now, thanks ever so much for your time tonight. It's been really fantastic talking with you, Brian. Best of luck with everything you're doing on YouTube.
Well, it's been a pleasure, John. Thank you so much for having me on, and we will be in touch. I can't wait to see where we go from here.
So I really hope you enjoy that trio of interviews. And now, back to the rest of the regular program. Yeah, so we should talk about the henchmen. There's some great hench work going on here. In fact, there's one particular henchman that every so often, as a sort of scene transition, you hear him back in the background shout out stuff like, "Come on, you tire chuckers, chuck them tires." Right. Like you hear little things like he's getting them, whipping the townspeople back into shape. There's some great little, you keep your ear out. You'll hear some neat little sort of slang terms that this post-apocalyptic world has. But we've got obviously Kane Hodder as Kinton. Gets quite a large role in this. And in fact, on my DVD is listed on the DVD. It says Bo Svensson, Kane Hodder, and Brian James. So they are listed as. In fact, Joe Lara's name is not even on the front of this DVD. Poor Joe Lara. But anyway, so we get we get Kane Hodder, who's great, very violent, and as I say, repping his famous Jason character on his beret. We get James C. Victor as Julie's, which is Brian James's sniveling son. He's great. We get Billy L. Sullivan as Lake. That's the boy. That's the little boy, the kid. We get Brian Huckeba as Chicken Boy. Yeah. We get Jim Cody Williams as Charlie Bacchus. He shows up as almost everyone does. If you're into B movies, you have to have shown up on an episode of what, Matt? Silk Stockings. Every single person from all of the B movies we've covered for the last 5 years have all tread the boards in Silk Stockings, as has this fine gentleman, Jim Cody Williams. Tremendous facial hair. I mean, in everything that he's in, phenomenal facial hair. We get Robert O'Reilly as Evermore, and we get the writer and co-director himself, Jacobsen Hart, as Green Street.
Right.
And Adolfo Quinones as Deacon. That rounds out our henchmen. But they're all great. They're all great, right?
And also Cole S. McKay was a henchman. He's playing cards with them at one point, and I think I don't know if he gets shot.
He doesn't have a name, though. He doesn't have a...
That's right.
He's not a named hench. But
that's right. That's right. That's right.
And even Paul Volk shows up as Lee.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But a great set of henchmen. I think I really like them. They've all got their own look. And at one point, doesn't Svensson call them out, and it kind of cuts to each one of them. And I think when it cuts to Deacon, he just has that tobacco drool come out of his mouth. Oh, phenomenal. Great big tombstone yellow teeth and just a big long string of tobacco drool that comes out of his mouth. Yeah, such a fantastic. Any other favorite scenes, man, in the movie? We could talk about the ending, but is there any favorite scenes you have up until then?
I mean, I like I like the duel. That's a great one because you get that moment where Svensson. So there's a duel that's about to happen between Lara and the sniveling son, and Svensson goes up to Lara and says, if that's Quantrell's son. If you kill him, a lot of people are going to come after you. And so this is kind of one of those moments where you get some really good writing in the film. But the result is something wacky, right? Because the son goes to draw, Lara shoots the gun out of his hands, and then starts shooting the gun up in the air, kind of like if you're Super Mario and you're in your cape and you're bouncing, And it was a really funny moment. And
the best bit about what sells that whole thing, because he's just firing in the air and you're just seeing the gun flying around, is as he then walks towards Julie's, the gun falls out of the sky and Lara just casually grabs it and hands it back to him. It's so well done. It's so well
beautiful.
Done.
It's beautiful, and it's one of those ones that I think when you write it, you're probably like, well, what is this going to look like? And it could go either way, right? That scene could go, and to be honest, I said that scene could go either way. I think you could watch that and be of split minds, right? I think it's one of those things where there's a line, and if you watch that scene and you enjoy that scene, then this movie's going to work for you. And if you watch that scene and you go, okay, come on, guys, get over yourself. What are we doing here? It's ridiculous. That this is probably not the movie for you, I think. And I think that's kind of the case with this entire film. I think this film is one of those movies that's it's not like you get it or you don't get it. I think it's more like, it's doing its own thing, right? And whether, if you get it, you get it. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. But if you enjoy it, you're really going to enjoy it kind of movie.
Definitely. And so, it's definitely doing its own thing. It definitely doesn't feel like anything else that I think PM Entertainment does. I don't know if I'm right in saying it feels to me like it has the largest body count of any PM Entertainment movie. Because like I say, there's sequences in the movie where, a guy on sort of a World War II looking machine gun mows down 20 guys. You obviously have all the henchmen that he takes out. You have the big shootout and fist fight and everything that happens at the beginning. You have at least a few crashes and explosions and things out on the highway. I think like a good, decent amount of people like perish in this movie. And then you have the final sequence, which is incredible. One little bit I have to mention before we get to the final sequence is Bo Svensson snapping necks and cashing checks with the 3 roach eaters in the desert. Bo doesn't do very much in this movie, but when he does, it's a joy.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm trying to think. So Bo Svensson, because he's about the same size as Dolph. They're both big, like 6'5".
Oh, yeah,
Swedes.
Bo's well over 6'3", I think. Yeah, he's a big guy.
And so I was going to say, like, okay, Dolph is getting it, but actually, Bo Svensson was younger when he made this than Dolph is now.
Right.
He was 55 when he made this. Dolph is in his 60s. Because I was going to say, like, this is kind of the next place for Dolph to go. Dolph needs to walk in the desert somewhere and just have a bunch of like cannibals nipping at his heels and him just like kind of tossing them aside, like like they're dogs nipping at or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it was a beautiful place, and I think Bo Svensson, when he was coming to America from Sweden, and he started getting these acting roles while he was studying metaphysics in California University. I don't know what he saw himself. What roles he saw.
Is that
himself
what Bo
in.
Svensson did? He studied metaphysics.
I believe so. I didn't realize he was a Marine. He was a Marine in the U.S. as well. But yeah, he was pursuing a degree, a PhD in metaphysics. So not quite Dolph's mechanical engineering that he was pursuing at MIT.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I mean, looking at his entire career, I don't know where you put that moment when he's doing that. It's got to be up there. It's got to be a top 5, moment for him.
A Svensson moment. Oh yeah, it's phenomenal. I call it the snapping necks and cashing checks sequence.
Yes.
But he goes off and he goes to Brian James, who apparently has like an underground or like cave-based radar like lair. I don't know what he's doing there. Like what have you been doing, Brian? Just hanging out in your radar lair looking at a big green screen. Why have you been doing that? Anyway, thought you were like forming an empire. Anyway, Brian James has been hiding out in his little lair. Svensson comes back, says, everyone's dead. You've got to come sort this out. Brian James rides back into town and is immediately confronted with like some upright coffins, in which is his son dead.
Right.
We get Brian James doing the best, like, no, and wailing and crying and whatever right in the camera. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. And then as he comes into town, they've set up, and I love shit like this in Westerns or action movies or whatever, where you go, what have we got to work with? Oh, we got a bunch of townspeople who have never like really shot anything before or done anything before. But if I, Joe Lara, strategically place them around the town, we can make them a formidable attack for Brian James's remaining henchfolk they're going to show up with James. So you get as Brian James goes into town, you get a lot of reaction shots of like James like looking off or whatever, and then you see shots of like people poking up with a gun and firing at him, or like running out of a window and firing at him, or like someone up on a roof, or like they've sort of set it up perfectly in the Western town for them to succeed. And then the big, they blow up some of the buildings. I mean, they really don't care about the town anymore. They're just like, we're going to fucking annihilate this town just to get Brian James out of it. And the ultimate act of annihilation is that, much to like James is like, what are they doing now? Right. Is that Joe Lara runs up the inside of a brick smokestack chimney that they have at the end of this town, runs all the way up the inside, a big spiral staircase, gets to the top, having set a bunch of charges, abseils, like runs down there, and you see the stuntman almost get like overcome by the velocity. Right. Whatever, I'm not good at physics, or I'm not good at words, but you know what I mean.
Right, he's doing a forward rappel,
right,
and and he's just going straight down, which is
you see the speed of that almost overtake the stuntman, because he does it like he's running down the side of the brick chimney for the first half of it, and then at a certain point, the falling momentum, whatever that physics term is, the falling momentum meets the wind and meets the chimney and meets a stuntman, and he at a certain point he's just like, oh fuck it, I'm just gonna like let the rope go and just fall basically. Right. But it's a just a phenomenal stunt. I mean, an incredible stunt. And then as he's running away, they detonate the entire fucking chimney. And it is the largest explosion PM Entertainment ever did, in the history of their films. It is an impressive sight. I mean, it is an impressive sight. It's like if you remember in the beginning of Lethal Weapon 3, where they detonate that building, and obviously Los Angeles was detonating that building anyway, and they just said, can we come down and shoot them running out of the building before you detonate it? Beginning of Lethal Weapon 3, you see an entire building, like, truly blown up. It's like in one of the Ocean's 11s, you see a casino, and they do this in Vegas all the time, but they do a controlled explosion to bring down a casino and level it and whatever. Well, that's what they did here, except it being PM Entertainment, it was kind of controlled. Right. Like, they didn't quite know. It's worth the price of admission. I mean, God, if nothing happened in this movie and then it just, at the very end, they blew up the chimney, you'd be like, oh, fuck, this is great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And it's the way they set it up where it's like, you know, you're watching it and Lara's on the top of this thing. Brian James says, go get him. So obviously, you know, what's the smartest thing to do if you're baddies? Well, you want to go through a choke point where your greater numbers suddenly become a disadvantage. But also you want to go through this choke point against somebody who has the higher ground on you. None of that can go bad, right? None of that's going to go wrong. So you already know what's happening. And you see Lara's like lighting what looks like a long stick of vanilla or something. He's just lighting this thing and you're like, okay, all right, so this is just going to, you know, blow up all these guys and all that stuff.
But doesn't he light the fuse and the fuse starts to burn up as he comes down?
Exactly.
Like the fuse is going up as he's running down. Yeah, it's great.
Exactly. And I think that's when you start to realize, like, this is not just going to be like these guys getting stuck in this choke point of this ladder and getting killed, but something bigger is coming here.
Oh, yeah.
And then when he runs away, you realize, or actually, no, you're right. Like, he does the forward rappel, and he's rappelling down. You realize, like, oh no, this is what they're doing here.
Oh yeah.
And then when it actually happens, and you realize, like, this isn't like you know, Antonio Margheriti's great model work here. This is something else. It's utterly these are the moments that make PM. That you watch one of these and you hope you get a moment like this. But also you can't imagine. There isn't a way to imagine enough to be able to fully hope for something like this. Right. Like, what you're hoping for is not this. No. It ends up being better than you hoped for.
And not only that, it's not even the climax of the movie.
No.
Like, there's more action to come.
Yes.
They blow up an entire town, basically. Yeah. They shoot a ton of bad guys. And so you see the little kid who's been, we didn't really talk about this, but Stacey Foster has a little kid with her. Of course she does. And the little kid ends up in an old school bus that has been kind of retrofitted as sort of a post-apocalyptic tank. He's in there. Of course he is. Brian James decides, no, I'm going to hijack this and drive the bus off. So, of course, everyone has to chase it, not only to get Brian James, but to get the kid back. Yeah. And one of the, like, as if it wasn't, as he drives out of town, he hits his dead son, and his dead son, like, splats up on the windscreen, spitting blood all over the thing. And, like, Brian James is, like, whimpering and, like, what is it? Yeah. Like, it just, from the explosion of the chimney to the bus chase, it just goes fucking insane.
Right. It's classic PM as well. Like, we've talked about, there's other PM films where, like, what would be enough? Right, the explosion of that tower would be enough. Right, they're like, no, we're going to tack a chase onto that.
Yes,
and when we tack this chase on, this is not just going to be a chase; it's going to be a chase where stuntmen are getting on roofs of cars and smashing through windscreens and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, and it ends with a huge.
We can have Brian James run over his dead son, who's already.
It's amazing. It's
so good.
Yeah. I mean, again, everybody else would be like, it's like what people say about Gerald Ford, the president, where it was like, you know, he was like this, you know, all pro football player at Michigan and had this really great career. And that's usually enough for most people. But then Gerald Ford goes on to be like Speaker of the House and president. It's like PM, you know, for most places, you blow up that huge building. That's enough, you know. Right. But PM's like, no. I'm going to go on to have, you know, or you know, Fred Williams with his great football career goes on to have his great movie career. It's like, no, this is our movie career after. This is Fred Williams' movie career. It's this chase scene.
Yeah. So we get a fantastic chase scene with all sorts of vehicular madness going on, and with I mean, and basically, like we get to a point at the very end where, Joe Lara and Brian James are like lying and bleeding out on the tarmac, and Lara's quick draw just finishes James off in the last minutes, because otherwise, maybe James would be able to get a shot off himself. And then, the Stacy and her boy are like there, and they're trying to figure it out. And then the trash can man, who I know that's not his name, but I'm calling him that, with his little, like, it's not a tinfoil hat, but he has like a little funnel type hat thing on it, whatever. Yeah. He brings Lara's motorbike from town up to the spot where they've had this big crash. And, he's like, oh, man, I love this bike. Like, I almost took it for myself. Like, it's a great bike, but I brought it for you, Mr. Lara. I brought it for you. I'm calling him Mr. Lara. His name's Johnny Yuma, of course. He's like, I brought it for you, Yuma. I brought it for you. Because he's trying to be like the guy in the way. He's kind of trying to be like the Sancho Panza, I guess, to Don Quixote of Joe Lara, to use a very literary terminology. But yeah, he's trying to be like the guy, and you see this in Westerns all the time. The stranger comes into town, and then there's like the little guy's like, I'll help you out, Mr. Stranger with no name. What's amazing is that Yuma drives off. Like, there's no like big reconciliation with Stacey Foster. You see them kiss earlier in the movie, and you think, all right, this is the time where he's gonna live happily ever after with Foster and her kid. Nope, no time for that. And why? Because this whole movie he was a bounty hunter who was trying to get General Quantrell, and as he drives away, the little wanted dead or alive piece of paper winds up with Stacy. She looks at it and she's like, wow, that's why he was here this whole time. So he Lara wraps James up in a blanket, straps him to the back of the bike, and hightails it out into the sunset, baby, like all good Westerns. What a great movie.
Oh, just a ton of fun. Yeah.
Ton of fun.
You can't do much better than this on a Saturday night with, whatever. I always say pizza and beer. I think whatever. I don't really drink beer much anymore, so I probably should say more like pizza and soda. That's probably more my deal. But either way, or pizza and maybe call back to a previous episode. We did a pizza colada.
Pizza colada. Can of pizza colada. I have to say, I think what is most flabbergasting about this movie is that it has any negative reviews. I can understand someone watching it and going, I can see what they were trying to do or whatever, but it didn't completely tickle me, but I respect what they did. There are some reviews on IMDb that I was reading that I was like, where people are giving it like 2 stars and saying that it's the worst movie they've ever seen. I cannot understand that. I cannot understand that. And we're living in a world where I can't understand a lot, Matt.
Right.
About what's going on. But I really don't understand. Even the most jaded of I don't know, straight to video watching dudes would watch this movie and get something out of it. If you're not, I just don't know what to tell you.
No, I agree with you. I think, I can understand, somebody, grading it maybe a little harder thing, like 3 stars. 3 stars is a good number.
I can see it between 4 to 6 stars. That I'll understand someone being like, it wasn't my
I guess
cup
it's
of
3 out
tea.
of 5. I guess, 3 out of 5. Yeah.
Oh, 3 out of 5. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I can see it out of 10.
Yeah. But there's too much fun going on here objectively.
Right.
But I think the other thing, though, I think from PM's standpoint, when you watch, like, for example, Stacey Foster trying to, fire an M16 and it just looks ridiculous. Like, PM doesn't always try to sell things. Like a lot of movies, they want to sell it to you. Can this actor sell this scene? Can they do it? Can they make it work? And I think this movie almost didn't care. Like, for example, Joe Lara's character, I think part of the reason why his character is so good is that he's not trying to sell us anything. Like, I'm going to be the Clint Eastwood character. He's just doing what he's doing.
Right.
He's saying his funny lines, like, well, what do I have to run from? Or like, when the kid comes up to him and says, are you going to kill so-and-so? Well, there's no profit in that. Oh, okay. Well, you're going to kill. No, there's no profit in that either. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, it's just like, just like those, it's not trying to be, it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't care what you think of it, but it's not trying to sell you anything. No. It's saying, this is our movie. This is what we're doing. You like it. That's great. We hope you do.
Yeah. And just because it's one of the films where PM Entertainment is firing on all cylinders. The acting across the board is genuinely good. It's not just good for a B movie, it's genuinely good. The cinematography across the board is not just good for a PM entertainment movie, it is genuinely, like, beautifully filmed in places. The soundtrack is not just good for a B movie, it's genuinely good. Now, look, yes, there are exploitation elements, there are PM entertainment elements, there's action elements, there's ridiculous explosions, and if you are not aware of those tropes, maybe that grates on you. Maybe you look at that and you go, oh, that was a bit grating. I just don't know how you watch this movie and don't love something in it. I mean, there is... Otherwise, you just don't like movies. Like, I don't like... And I mean that... Like, you know, we can go back and forth on you know, why I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I am a Star Trek fan. But I don't watch Star Wars and go, oh, it's a 1 star. Star Wars is clearly not a 1. Even the worst Star Wars film is not a 1-star film. Right. There's too much skill involved. There's too much creativity involved. There's too much storytelling involved. I don't happen to be a space fantasy guy. I just don't happen to be that guy. But when I watch it, I wouldn't give it a 1 star. It's like 3-4 stars. Even the worst Star Wars films are, you know, a 3-4 star. And that's what I mean. It's like, if you watch this movie, I don't care what your films are, what you like, what your taste is, what genres you're a fan of, whatever it is. If you like film in its broad term and you can't give this at least 3 out of 5 or 5 out of 10 or whatever, then you don't like film. That's how much I love this movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's, especially as a PM fan, I think this is just like I don't know, let's say like it's a, you know, it should be worth, you know, if we're doing out of 10, it should be 4 out of 10 off the bus. And then it's just, you add on these other pieces to it and it gets it, you know, higher on that. I think, you know, I think some people go in and they just, you know, you never know. Like, you never know what somebody's, you know, going, you know, when they're watching one of these, how well they're paying attention, how much they're seeing things. I mean, the Bo Svensson character, I mean, the things I love about him is like, for example, when he's breaking down who these, you know, he's in the bar and he's telling Lara who all the characters are. Well, you can see that Lara kind of uses that information when he's deciding who he's picking off at certain points. Right. Oh, okay, these guys aren't military men, so they're probably going to fall for this trick about, you know, you go into the barn, there's an ambush in the barn, or, you know, there's little elements like that. But then you get the massive PM elements. I mean, that chase scene at the end is amazing. The chase scene at the you know, early in the middle of the film,
and about like 25 minutes in is great. Yeah.
Those kinds of things for me. If a movie is well paced, which this is well paced, like I said, it starts slow. It kind of, but when I say it starts slow, I mean it kind of builds to something.
Right.
So it's not like you're getting dead moments. It's just more like it's sort of, you know, little bits here and there to they kind of grow into something bigger to where we get to this huge denouement, which is a classic PM denouement. I think if you're a PM fan, that you can't ask for much more than that, what you're getting with this movie.
Well, also, I think just the change of scene for PM is refreshing in the sense that we see a lot of like either downtown Las Vegas or downtown Los Angeles shot movies, as I indicated in my introduction. There's a lot of like neon hues and city after dark kind of PM entertainment films. You've got those. Then you've got kind of the sci-fi PM entertainment films, which again kind of use a lot of that like city after dark stuff or big warehouses or whatever. But when you think of something like T-Force that uses sort of that like bombed out trash heap kind of area with the half broken buildings and whatever, and they have those like dune buggy chases. And when you see this, there's a change of scene element that also, if you're a PM entertainment fan, just makes you go, oh, this is a little fresh for the eyes. You know what I mean? Yeah, which is, it's another part of this that makes it great. I mean, you know, sometimes that you know, fresh for the eyes doesn't work. When I think of like Hollywood Safari, you know, maybe the kids movie element maybe doesn't quite work, but you know, for an adult R-rated movie, this is. I agree with you. For me, I mean, again, I didn't have it as high as you have it for PM, but I have it pretty high. Like I said, I've got it as like my 9th favorite of the. So your ranking within PM is about 9, and I have it. I think I have it at joint first right now, but I haven't figured out my. I only have it ranked on Letterboxd by what I have it, and I have it as a 5 out of. Have it as a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd now. You know, I don't know as we go through I've seen 40 PM entertainment movies at this point, and I'll watch a ton more. Obviously, as we go through, I'll watch all of them. But so I don't know whether it holds on to the top 5 spot that it is in right now. But I can tell you from my list, in terms of my top 5 at the moment, I have Steel Frontier. Again, not in any order. This isn't in any order. But I have Shotgun, Steel Frontier, Living to Die, Ring of Fire 3, which I really loved. And I hadn't seen before, so I really enjoyed that. And Rage. Yeah. And then the next 5, I have Inferno, Killer's Edge, The Art of Dying, Zero Tolerance, and Guardian Angel. And then I have T-Force, Last Man Standing, Pure Danger, The Sweeper, and Silencers. So, it's in there. It's in the top. I read out all the ones that Jacobsen Hart has written. It's it's top 10. Whether it's, I think I put it in my top 5 because I really think this is one that I will watch every year. This is in my top 20 favorite films of all time at this point. That's how much I love it. Other films, if Warrior of the Lost World is a great example of this movie. Hell Comes to Frogtown. It's got a lot of Hell Comes to Frogtown elements in it. And then the one that I mentioned, World Gone Wild. So yeah, it's very similar to Hell Comes to Frogtown, World Gone Wild, Warrior of the Lost World. I would consider those 3 that I just mentioned kind of top tier in that genre. I actually, as much as I love the Fred Williamson Italian post-apocalyptic Mad Max ripoffs, I don't love them anywhere near as much as I love the 4 or 5 that I've just mentioned. And Steel Frontier is there with a bullet now.
Yeah. Well, I think the other reason why I like this better than some of those Italian ones, again, is that you don't get the gratuitous torture in this. You don't get the rape. For whatever reason, they liked rape a lot in those movies. They don't have that here. You do get assault. You get sexual assaults, but you don't get, full on, that usually there's something that somebody gets rescued in time or something like that. And I think those are elements to this that I appreciated. That I don't need to go that far with my movies, Yeah.
This dance is right up to the line of exploitation that PM is comfortable with without going over into gratuity. Finally then, ranking within Joe Lara is difficult because I've only seen 4 Joe Lara movies, so this one is number 1. But ranking within Brian James movies, that's a little tougher, I think.
Well, because there's 2 Brian James, right? Where do can I place Blade Runner? I mean, I don't even know if or Armed and Dangerous, do those ones belong in there? Because a lot of times I just think in terms of B movies. I mean, there's another PM flick in here, which I don't, he's better in this than he is in that, which is The Underground.
Right.
But what was the one that we talked about on your podcast? The one he did with Wings Hauser.
Oh, that was great. That's fantastic as well. Yeah, I'm going to forget what that's called, but
Dead Man Walking. Was it Dead Man Walking?
Brian James has also done an episode of Silk Stalkings, by the way.
Of course he has. Yes. Of course he did a Highlander episode too,
and an episode of Renegade.
Yeah.
With Lorenzo Lamas, who obviously has been in lots of PM Entertainment films. Yes, right. Dead Man Walking.
Dead Man Walking.
And he reunites with Wings Hauser in Nightmare at Noon.
Yeah.
And, I would say if we're talking B-movie Brian James, right? We're not talking Blade Runner and even Tango and Cash. We're not talking that. We're talking, Dead Man Walking, Nightmare at Noon, Street Asylum, Nemesis.
Right.
We're talking that Brian James. That's the Brian James when you show up and you're like, oh yeah, okay, this is gonna be watchable because Brian's here and he'll carry me through it, even if the rest of it's a piece of shit. I would probably put it in the top 4 of Brian James.
Yeah, for the B movies. Yeah, for sure. I think this is right up there as one of his best in the B movie area. Again, I think Blade Runner, Armed and Dangerous, those movies I probably put in a different category, but this one's definitely up there.
Yeah, PM give him a little more to do. They give him a little more of a thoughtful persona rather than just sort of mad eye rolling.
Yes, exactly.
And then Nightmare at Noon, where does he even have a line? I know he's just hanging out in the desert with being an albino in a Colonel Sanders outfit, but
well, and then also too, he plays the mad scientist in Frogtown 2. where
yes, he does.
yes, he looks like Carrot Top in that one.
Yes,
which is great. Yeah,
but no, I mean, I still think that Dead Man Walking, Cherry 2000, these are great Brian James movies. But
yeah,
this is in the top 3 or 4 for me, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, look, Matt, thank you ever so much. This was a joy. This was everything I wanted it to be.
Yes.
Steel Frontier was a genuine discovery for me.
Yeah, this is right up there. This is one of my favorite PMs. Because they're all a lot of times my favorites. But this is definitely up there, and I think it's definitely one people should check out.
Definitely so. All right. Well, look. Thank you ever so much for being on this episode of the PM Entertainment Podcast. Matt, you will come back. Of course you will come back. You are my brother in PM Entertainment. So you will hear from Matt a lot on this podcast. But thank you ever so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a ton of fun.
And such a great movie to start with.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
You are now leaving the PM Entertainment Podcast.